What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the Functional Podcast, where we address the senseless, absurd, asinine, nonsensical, irrelevant, unwise, and ludicrous notions of the health and fitness industry. Today, I'm joined firstly by Mike Mucciolo, HBS from Functional Patterns Santa Monica, and you might recognize him from the long-form videos that he's been putting out, where he breaks down popular health topics that help you discern information more carefully and within a relevant context. Next up, we're going to be bringing on Johnny Eblen. He's a pro MMA fighter, and he's the current Bellator middleweight champ. He's gone from being limited by an assortment of injuries to becoming a world champion after utilizing FP protocols. We did a testimonial on this page, so make sure you guys check that out. It's on YouTube. And then last but not least, we have Naudi Aguilar coming on. You guys might have heard of him. He's the founder of Functional Patterns. He's hated by many people in the industry, and he's also dodged by many in the fitness industry. So he's going to be coming on. Let me see if I can get these guys on. Let's get Mike. And Naudi. Cool. So
Literally about to go outside. Mike.
no
I know about that.
So whether it's people still doing back squats, demonizing sugar, or blindly trusting the established science, we say that first principles thinking and nuance is more important, as well as testing with first principles thinking. And we rarely see that in studies that confirm our biases within FP. Secondly, if we agree with everything that people say from people like Yuval Noah Harari or Ray Pete, does Instagram wrongly censor relevant information? And are PUFAs worse than saturated fats, as well as if sunlight is harmful and if you're at risk for cancer from overexposing yourself to sunlight? So, Mike, let's start off with the cherry picking. Oh, how are you guys doing, by the way?
Good.
Good, man.
Great.
Doing good.
I'm good. I'm good over here. It's a little bit later, but yeah, I'm good.
So let's begin, Mike, with the claim that we're cherry picking studies. From what I've seen with the rebuttals that people give us, they'll usually give us studies that prove their point or that they're trying to solidify their argument with. And to be fair, if people want to be skeptical, it's good, and there is a lot of cherry picking that happens within the established science itself. So I think it's fair for people that are skeptical to want to say that cherry picking can happen anywhere, even within our community. So if you can talk a little bit about that, Mike, with the studies that you've been using for the videos, and did we pick those studies because it just confirmed our biases within FP, or where did we get those studies from?
Yeah, that's an interesting thing, because when people talk about cherry picking, there was one instance where a lot of times, people don't infer the kind of correct thing, but based on kind of the order in the video. So for example, people were talking about the Ioannidis study, and then so here's the thing. They're talking about cherry picking, but I literally put the Ioannidis study, and I knew people were going to say, oh, well, there's been responses to the Ioannidis study. So then I put in the John Hopkins study, which is a direct rebuttal to the Ioannidis study.
And what's the Ioannidis study? Can you, for people that are listening, if they're not aware?
Absolutely. Thanks for that, Rodney. So the Ioannidis study is why most published research is false. It's strong words. And that's the thing. So Ioannidis is a smart guy. He's not an idiot. And he's a scientist, and he works at a mainstream established scientific medical university. And he talks about how, in terms of the statistics, you can either conduct a study and then the methods are kind of in favor of proving your biases, or the studies that are published don't have enough statistical power to prove what they're talking about, or when it comes down to the meta-analysis, you have to look at the separate methods of each individual study. So what he's saying is that what it comes down to is you can't just trust a study, even if it's a systematic review, because what happens is later on down the line, the methods evolve, and then whatever one has decided in terms of the conclusion of the previous systematic review, later on things can change, right? In terms of the viewpoint of it. So Ioannidis issued that first research study, and he gives a lot of statistical analysis on it. And then after that, he starts talking, and then after that, John Hopkins issued a response. And they said, we have to say that at this moment in time, it can't be proven. We don't agree that it's proven that 50% of published research is false. However, we concede with many of Ioannidis' points. And I read that word for word in the video.
And the number that he gave was 50%, correct?
That's right.
Yep. Cool. Yep. If you guys want to say something on that.
Yeah, I guess on my end, I never really. I did a little bit. I actually never went into the data and the methods myself back in the day when I used to look at studies. I just you get life experience and people make all kinds of formulations about they can do all kinds of research on all sorts of different things and conclude all sorts of shit. But when you train people and you're boots on the ground and you're working with people, you begin to understand that life is in general more complicated than what a scientific study can test. There's more at play happening in reality, and I realized this probably like 15 years ago, 16 years ago. And although science can be reliable in some regards, one of the main things that I think is problematic with science as a whole, because we could sit here and say that half of studies are reliable, but how many of these studies, if you look at stretching, if you look at cardio, I guess cardio probably, I'd imagine cardiovascular development probably has to have some longitudinal data to show that it's beneficial. But if you look at all these stretches, all these methods that they employ, my constant concern is that they never look at what happens over the course of the long term. And that's been my biggest, again, most people in this field can't retain clients. And if you can't retain clients, then ultimately you never have the problem of having to deal with your customers on a long-term basis and trying to help them. But when you implement your interventions to help them with their body, and never mind this, I wasn't a guy that was into trying to fix people's pain. More than anything, I was a guy just trying to give people a good workout, work them out hard. But then when they'd be like, my knee hurts, I can't really make it to my next session, I'm like, well, this is kind of going to impact my bottom line as a trainer, and I'm not going to be able to make a living if my people keep getting hurt over and over again because their knee hurt or their shoulder hurt. And never mind that. I didn't have this happen a lot. I just had it happen a few times, and I was like, well, this is not going to happen anymore. And that's why I had to start tweaking things in my training to get it to where people were out of pain. And none of this went through the whole process of going through the journals or looking. I think the reason FP is so unorthodox from other methods, I think ultimately boils down to the fact that I didn't take any conventional approaches when it came to tackling the body. Everything that I did was completely unconventional. I guess maybe you could say it was conventional in the sense that I kind of got my start with NASM, looking at their protocols and going down that rabbit hole. But even the protocols that they have, I mean, they don't do anything. They literally don't do anything. Well, I guess they do. They probably just make you more flaccid, the protocols that they employ. But from personal experience, I saw the people that were more evidence-based way back in the day, and I was like, they don't look any more competent than the next person. I saw somebody would talk about doing evidence-based, and I'd see a guy with a master's degree, doing some renegade rows with a 70-year-old man who's just flopping all over the place, and I'm like, that just doesn't make any sense to me, man. So I mean, yep. I know Mike and Rodney and Johnny, I know you guys are probably more on social media looking at the nonsense. I mean, since I haven't really been on Instagram as much, I'm fortunate enough to get disconnected from it. But it's almost like everybody is very concerned in this industry with trying to just establish a reputation and then maintain a reputation. And whatever gets you that attention, whatever garners you that attention is all anybody really gives a shit about. And me personally, I'm just kind of I played it to some extent. There's things that a lot of what's going on now, I used to tell people do you even rotate, bro? I used to say shit like that. And it's it kind of mirrors the sentiment of the people telling you to bow your fucking knees out or to, to put your head over the top of your foot. And just people are just saying the same. It's essentially the same thing, but then when you learn enough in life, when you actually try fixing people's mechanics, you realize that it's if I had to go down this path of saying, okay, are you supposed to bend the spine or straighten the spine? If I limited myself to a debate on center stage to debate everybody on everything that I discovered, then I would be talking. I'm like, how would I put up like 3,000 things, right? Like you guys have worked with me. How many variables did I cover? Eblen, when I was just working with you like a few weeks ago, how many things am I accounting for, bro? Can I literally say, hey, look, here's an oppositional shear. Here's a continuous shear. Here's and the ribs and the lumbar are doing this, and the thoracic and the T and the rib cage are doing this. There's so much to have to like dissect. And unfortunately, science is just really freaking slow. And I mean, that's why when Ioannidis, the reason I don't like to even cite studies myself is because it's like people are always going to make an excuse about that. If you get results, people aren't really going to have at some point, they may have an excuse. They may say, hey, those results are falsified or whatever. But if you get thousands of them, at some point, like everybody that's looking at that person that's criticizing what you're doing is going to be like, you're just a fucking hater. And then they're going to say, well, I don't really want to listen to you. I don't think that my concern right now with FP is trying to like develop infrastructure, and maybe later on down the line we'll do studies and whatnot. But even then, it's like there's always excuses with studies, man. Like we can find things that confirm our biases on our end, and other people can find things that confirm their biases on the other side. I just don't. I don't see how we come to any definitive conclusions with citing these soft science studies. I think the only way that we get there is by making like significant changes on people and people all across the board, not just citing not just like doing, hey, look, we're going to do back squats on athletes and then see whether they get better or not. It's like, let's do, I remember, I think I challenged Brett Contreras, I think on the debate that I had with him, I said, hey man, why don't we go head to head on a study on people that are like 55, 60, and we'll see how well your back squats, hip thrusts, your entire training protocols work on people who are 55, 60 years old. Because by the time you're 55, 60, you can't just move so freely in space. You can't do that. And so it's like nobody wants to engage in studies like that. Those are the types of studies that I would like to engage in because it would require more precision, but I don't see anybody wanting to take a challenge with me on that front. If anybody does, by all means, let's train some 60-year-olds, some 65-year-olds who are in pain, and or even if they're not in pain, we'll just train them, and then we can see you guys can use your back squats, deadlifts. You can use all the established scientific protocols that are done in evidence-based programs, and we can go head-to-head. Until we have a discussion like that, we're never going to find any conclusive. We're never going to arrive at what's it called? What's the term called, guys?
Consensus.
At a consensus. But with Johnny, we can arrive at a consensus that he's one of the best fighters in the world because you test the science of fighting and then you end up in a cage, and it's very easy to conclude who's the better and who's not. When it comes to training, when it comes to rehab, it's not so easy. That's why honestly, I even when I tried telling you guys as a team, like Rodney and Mike, when we're in the group, I try seeing if I can reel you guys back in a little bit, because most of these people, I guess there is a concern that I have, and you guys can tell me this. How much is Instagram starting to censor content? How often are they starting to fact check content? Is this a regular occurrence right now, or is this kind of like just a one-off? What have you guys been seeing?
I don't know. The first thing I saw was when they were censoring Mike's stuff about the sun, and I thought that was very interesting. I haven't personally ever been censored about like when I've posted about FP or anything about like animal-based diets or sun or like grounding or anything like that. But I thought it was very interesting that when I was checking on Mike's story the other day, that he was showing like Instagram was like taking down his post or something or whatever, and it was just pertaining to sunlight and like getting outside. And I was like, that's weird.
So is this new? Is this a fairly new thing? You guys haven't seen it before. I'm just wondering if this
I've seen it on Facebook.
I personally have it. That was the first time I've ever seen that.
Facebook has been doing it for a while.
On health advice, is it just on? I'm not talking about the COVID. I'm talking about the other things that relate to just even whether it was stretching, squats, whatever it may be. Is there anything else that's been shown yet?
I don't think on health and fitness really. I think that was it happened to be an Australian-based like fact checker, and I think they just had a certain sensitivity to it because their cancer rates are so high. So that Australian-based fact checker, saw this dentist, and then they did a write-up on it and like tried to create some sort of outrage on it to like spread the word to never get sun.
Yeah, I mean, this is the tough part, man.
Yeah,
I want
to reel you guys back in a little bit.
Yeah, go
and
ahead,
Nadi, by
Rodney.
the
Go
way,
ahead, go ahead, go ahead.
you have a little bit of an echo on your end. But Nadi, you were mentioning the studies and how they're limited. I want to say also that not only are they limited, they're slow. So if they are reliable, they might be reliable within a very small context, but to evolve from that context with whatever methods that like the methods change all the time, like Mike was saying, and then it's very slow to continue to try to check these methods and these studies. So it does come down to more of like the monetary side of it, whether people are wanting to get the attention or wanting to get popularity, or if they're wanting to push a product or things like that. So I just wanted to kind of reiterate that. And then also you mentioned the debates. It's basically the same thing. When you start debating something, you get away from the reality of it. Kind of like you're talking about the map and you're talking about
That's right.
the theory, but you get away from the actual application and reality. So that also makes it slow. And then it becomes a never-ending cycle where you can put up a study and it can confirm a part of the bias within a certain context, but then you can pull another one out, and there's never going to be a definite conclusion to that. So I agree with all. It's easy. Maybe it makes it easier on Instagram to censor things, because if you like what you said, Mike, right? It was like a very like the context is in Australia there's high cancer rates, so they're able to pull from this study, and then they're able to fact check you on saying that you're fine if you go outside before 10 a.m. But it's really, you probably shouldn't do too much of that in Australia based on a multitude of factors, where they're more European descent, the UV's higher out there, and there's also more factors or a higher instance of the disease in Australia. So yeah, I just wanted to make sure that we covered that. Go ahead, Donnie. Go ahead.
I think one of the main problems that occurs is that we're so inclined to tell people don't do this or do that, and when people go about that, they rarely ever consider like that sometimes it's the dosage that you're taking in, and that there's other factors that they should be looking at. So when let's say, for example, if I look at if I tell somebody to not do a back squat, I don't see, it's one of those exercises where I'm like, maybe you might be able to find some context where it could be useful, but there's so many other ways of training your legs that don't involve like directly loading your spine. I mean, you could load your traps and I wouldn't have as much of a problem with it, but if you're loading your spine directly and you have a bar directly on this, like right near the spine, it doesn't make any sense to me. So it's like, you're talking about a form of stimuli that didn't exist very much for humans or animals. Like, putting direct pressure on your spine is not something that we've really done. But the sun has kind of been there for a while. It just does. It seems like it's been there, and so I'm kind of like, maybe it's a part of the health equation. Just maybe we need to be adapted to UV light. Maybe at some point, it's what appears toxic. It's sometimes, even when like Paul Saladino talks about how eating vegetables, it could be toxic because plants have like I don't know if he's using the anti-nutrient debate. I've heard that they have defense chemicals
That's right.
that we aren't programmed to be able to deal with. But how do you know we're not meant to deal with that, or that cooking itself helps us deal with those chemical reactions, or the fact that to some degree we adapted to consume these things? I still eat minimal vegetables. Mostly I eat like root vegetables, but I don't really eat like that many greens, but I still consume them. I think so many times we need to think about the dosage of which we're taking something and whether we should or shouldn't do it. And from what you guys were telling me earlier regarding the fact that if it's UV7 or above, that you should wear a hat or a sweater, like
UV4, right, Mike?
Yeah,
UV4?
Yeah. Well, UV7, they say avoid it no matter what. They say don't go in it at all. So
I get outside when it's
just
12,
that alone,
I'm like pumped.
that's what I'm saying. That's my favorite, is being out there from 12 to 2, soaking it up. You know what I mean? So, and then what you're talking about, Naudi, is exactly right. They lose nuance and context. So that's the thing that a scientific study can't do, because here's the thing. Who knows how advanced it could get in the future, right? I mean, I don't know. Maybe there's a way. But here's the thing, once again, people talk about these videos, and they're usually the same people, let's be real. For the most part, people are looking at them and understanding where we're coming from. But the same people have a tendency to say, oh, you're just, and I talked about this in the video, exactly. This is FP saying that evidence-based fitness goes against what they're selling. Therefore, they are talking smack on evidence-based fitness. And it's like, and they're like, that's why they won't conduct their own studies. And I was like,
okay, Mike, does FP go against their profit motives as it relates to evidence-based fitness?
I think so. I have a feeling that might be the case.
Differential
one might think. I mean,
well, right, exactly. It's like the argument is so kind of narrow. So here I am, like naively trying to explain, but at least for our general audience, that, like I said in the video, most people are removed from two things: manufacturing, what it takes to make things, and number two, how long of a time it takes and how expensive it is to set up a long-term study, right? And that's why I put it in the video. The study that I posted, that they did neuroimaging, they were analyzing people's cardiovascular fitness, and they just had to hire people to watch over these people, because otherwise you're relying on self-reported data. And that self-reported data is what? Qualitative. So you can only trust it so much. So if you're going to hire people to look over people and conduct at these different facilities, and usually it's multi-site, then you have to pay the participants. The study that I posted was a 2-year study, only 2 years, and cost $21 million to conduct, right? So that's the thing. It's like, okay, so there's the expense of the study.
Cutting off, Mike.
Research being slow.
Oh, you go. You're good.
Sorry, I'll come back in. The other part about research being slow is that the time spent conducting that, people are like, oh, FP is not conducting studies because it goes against what they're selling. But can we also say, look at all the people we've helped? If we were conducting studies and spending all that money and time on that, we have to look at the opportunity cost of the people that we could have helped in real time. And that's something that people just do not get. They don't think of it. Boom. They don't think of it as, if you do this, you have to let go of something else, right? People don't understand spectrums of utilizing their time and resources. They don't get that, because everybody's just used to everything being done right online. Everything's digital. Everything's done like pop, 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 right? So we're so far removed from that. People don't understand, hey, listen, if we do these studies, we have to dedicate time and resources to them. We're not the NIH. We don't have a 40-some-odd billion-dollar budget. So
I want to ask the group a question. Does Elon Musk have a profit motive with Tesla?
Yes.
Jevlin, I know you own a Tesla. Is that the best car you've ever owned?
It's the best car ever. Like, I don't
Me
understand
too.
why people pay hundreds of thousands of dollars for supercars and they don't drive themselves. I'm like, what's the point? Like, I don't get it. Like, why?
straight up.
So really, the point that I want to make is that just because I used to make the same argument back in the day when I was watching Zeitgeist, and they would talk about how profit is the enemy of all progress in society, and then Elon just takes a ginormous dump on it, and I feel that we're taking an even bigger dump on it than Elon is. The profit motive is not necessarily always the problem. It's how people are making the money that's the problem. Mm-hmm. If you're making money doing something dishonest, it's different than if you're doing something to make money doing something honest. That's the difference between the two types of work. Some work is contributive, while the other one is the exact opposite. So, when people try and say that, put forth that argument like, oh, yeah, you guys are biased to your bottom line. Yeah, our bottom line is, how do we make our money? Yeah, you see those results? We have to get results in order to make our money, because if we don't get the result, we don't get the customers, and if we don't get the customers, we don't make money. So, yeah. Of course, this relates to our bottom line. I just feel like our industry is really filled with very naive individuals who think that training is that the body. It's one of those things. What do these guys always say? The body adapts.
That's right.
The body just adapts until it doesn't.
Yeah.
And then it gets injured, or then it's in pain, and then it doesn't, or then the person's depressed, or they're hyper anxious, or they have a whole assortment of different problems. Yes, the body will adapt, but it's up until a certain point. And what happens when it's not adapting? What happens when it maladapts? And they're very apt to want to talk about adaptation, but not maladaptation. And maladaptation is the biggest thing that's the thing that's interested me absolutely the most out of anything as it relates to human beings is in how many ways can we maladapt, right? If my palate is compressed, if my mandible isn't fully developed, if my cranium didn't fully develop, my upper traps, my pecs, lats, whatever. It's like there's so many maladaptations that we have made, and it's amazing to me that these people are like, oh yeah, the body just adapts. They're just naive. It's like quite literally dealing with people in this industry is really just like dealing with kids, playing pretend like they're having a little tea party or something. That's the only thing I could compare it to, bro. Because once you're actually in the field and you're having to like make new inventions, and that's another thing that I've heard. Now he's just inventing. He's just making things up as he goes. It's like, yeah, it's called being an inventor. You know who acknowledges me making things up as I go? You guys know who acknowledges that? That's very important. Who do you think acknowledges that?
The customer.
Oh, right.
The Patent and Trademark Office of the United States of America. In fact, the entire planet respects how I make things up as I go. You get what I mean? So I'm kind of like, oh, okay, yeah. I am making up things as I go because I have to. If I don't, then I operate at the pace that you guys are operating at, and then nothing gets solved. So yeah, man, I that whole notion of like, oh yeah, their bottom line orients around verifying what they do. So does everybody. This is capitalism, bro. Everybody's trying to uphold their position. The question is what you are offering actually solving the problem? Do you have evidence of your own? Forget empirical evidence. Do you have your own evidence to show that what you do works? No, then I'm not interested. That's how the consumer base operates. Sometimes people are naive enough to think that science is like the end all be all, but most people understand that, science doesn't apply to all life and that science gets it wrong all the fucking time.
Yeah, a good point that you made in another podcast was that most people conduct the research so they can have adoption. So because we did the research and because we're able to prove that, yes, this works, and we used all the fancy equipments and we pointed out the methods and it's on a paper and we got it submitted, then that's why you should listen to what I say. That's why you should buy what I have to do. FP doesn't have to do that. We basically jumped that obstacle in a sense because it works. People come in, they feel that it works, and they stay for a while. So I think that's a big point to make. And then the other part why they don't see that, let's say, yeah, like you said, they fix something or they attempt to fix something, and then the person might become anxious or something else might start to hurt. Then they refer out. So they almost take the responsibility away from themselves, where if they can't fix the problem in a systemic fashion, they're just treating it in an isolated fashion. They're able to refer out, and then they never see that person again. So they don't really know if what they did worked.
And where's the pressure for them to fix the problem? I'd like to know.
That's another point.
Where's the quality control measures? Like, I have quality control measures in my company that I have to institute to ensure that all the products that I sell, that the practitioners themselves are doing a good job. Like, as you guys know, I'm a Nazi. I'm not literally from that sense, but as you guys know, how I should. That's another thing I hate about the internet.
Yeah, I think it's so literal.
You can't even say
they
that.
Take everything super literal.
People will hold your reputation to about 15 seconds or 20 seconds of what you said or what you or like a single post that you put on social media. That's why I can't really deal with social media. But anyways, going back to what I was saying, yeah, I'm very stringent with how I approach things, and I just don't see that they're that stringent within the industry. I feel that how would I put it? The bar has been dropped so low, and they continue to just keep dropping the bar lower and lower, so that way nobody really has to take accountability for what's going on, right? The human structure just keeps degenerating, and then they just say, hey, your next posture is the best posture, right? No matter what it is, right?
They did this with testosterone.
What's that?
They did this with testosterone. Like, testosterone levels have been dropping in males, and now like the new average is like lower than it was before. And that's like, well, if you're average, you're good. Like, it's like, no, like literally the average is dropping over time. That's bad. That's like, they're giving health advice.
You guys ever hear about the Claire Patterson story?
No.
So he's the guy that discovered that we were pumping excessive amounts of lead into the atmosphere. You guys ever? So pretty much it took like 40 years, I think it was 40. This guy had to go all the way down to Antarctica and pretty much, I think, dig holes or like get ice remains.
Yeah. Ice samples. Okay, I think I've actually heard about
ice samples from like a mile down or something. It was something ridiculous.
Jesus.
So And so ultimately came back to where it's like, yeah, we were dumping excessive amounts of lead in the environment. What I think is crazy about that is what lead, I believe, actually does to your skeletal system. It does a lot of harmful things to your skeletal system. I just can't help but wonder, if you were born around that time, if that didn't actually end up, making you more of a degenerate now. Like,
For sure.
like how many did we correct for that mistake at any point just by getting rid of the lead? There's still some countries that still have leaded fuel in their country. Like we were pumping lead into the environment. You guys know what it says, unleaded fuel?
Right.
It's like,
oh my
right,
God,
it's unleaded.
I never knew that.
Now
was
I'm
right.
putting it together.
What's fascinating about it is that nobody pays attention to that shit.
my
Like nobody
God.
thinks
Right.
about the implications of like, oh, it's just unleaded fuel. No big deal, right?
Yeah.
Little did they know that this guy, Claire Patterson, had to go through unimaginable amounts of shit to try and get people to stop pumping lead into the environment. And really what the argument was from the fossil fuel industry, there's a chemical reaction that happens. They actually did this on Veritasium like a few weeks ago. They made a video on Veritasium on YouTube. But ultimately, the fossil fuel industry didn't want to drop it out because it happened to be really good for the engine or something like that. But it wasn't good for the body. So really what they just kept saying is like, you know what, let's just keep dropping the bar in terms of what's normal. We'll normalize this dysfunction that we're taking in. We know lead is bad for us, but we're just going to say, hey, look, it's within normal levels. And so then at that point, that's where Claire Patterson, and this, you have to realize, Claire Patterson was, and what I mean by Nazi, just I need to clarify it, he was a stickler for every little fucking thing. He's actually the first guy that discovered the actual age of the Earth. I believe he's a guy that actually discovered that. And so there was a whole slew of experiments that he had to undergo. He had to like sterilize the environment to extreme ends in order to pull that off. So I don't think people recognize the
How long did it take
of,
him? Do you know? You said 40 years, Naudi?
it was like anywhere, I think it was about 40 years before it became widely adopted. That probably more actually, Rodney. It may have actually been more. Like you'll watch the documentary. I can't remember. It's ridiculous. It's fucking ridiculous. So you have to realize that in order to make social change, you have to be a stickler. You have to look at every little fucking detail, and then from there run a risk analysis and say, is this going to be good for us or is it going to be bad for us, right? That's what I think I've done, obviously to a lesser degree of Claire Patterson, because that guy was on another fucking level. But essentially, I don't think people in science look at it that way. I think you have people that are genuinely concerned with where we go as a species, and then you have people that are just like, I'm not really good at many things, and you know what? How do I just kind of get by and find a way to get my how do I get in where I fit in and make my reputation amongst an established community that's not necessarily doing the right things? And unfortunately, in these times, I don't see that there's a lot of people with good motives to actually like push themselves and try and understand this. And that's why I think so much of like when you think about like, you know what, it's scoliosis. Oh yeah, you just live with scoliosis. Don't worry about it, right? If you got a hyperlordosis, don't worry about it. It's completely fine. Just don't worry about it. Worrying about it's what's going to be the worst. If you got a smoking habit, don't worry about it. As long as you're not worried about it, just keep smoking, bro. Smoke a pack a day. As long as you're not worried.
Just move the goalposts closer to your dysfunction, and like, oh, you're good. It's
exactly.
Normal. It's fine.
Exactly. And that's the concern that I have with this entire field, is that it's like you can't really you can't question it you can only question it to a certain point until people just end up like, their cognitive dissonance kicks in, and then it makes it impossible to actually engage with them in any legitimate way. I have tried so much to engage in good faith with people for the last 10 years on social media. Just doesn't fucking happen. It doesn't happen. That's why when people talk about inside fighting, I was one of the first people to reach out to major figures in the field to be like, hey, what's up? This guy's got a PhD. Hey, man, what do you think about this? I know you just trashed me publicly, but I'd like to engage in a discussion with you. You seem like one of the OGs. What's the deal? I get no messages back. Yet these guys are the ones that are slandering me in the public space. So yeah, man, it's tough. But yeah, go ahead.
Yes. So it seems like the parallel between that story with the lead now, or at least in our field, is the evidence fitness and people saying that evidence-based fitness works. So I have a client. He used to play in the NFL, and he started in high school, college, went to the NFL. So he went through as he describes it, the best of the best in terms of traditional or evidence-based training, and he got hurt. He ended up having to fight. He ended up tearing his MCL, and he got hurt, and then that's when he found me. So I wanted to ask Johnny what your experience was, because you worked in pretty high level. I mean, you train out of a high level facility. I don't know before that, maybe in college, what was your experience with evidence based fitness, and did it work for you?
I mean, I worked with a lot of credentialed doctors and physios and all that type of stuff, especially at the University of Missouri. Like, anytime I got hurt, that's what I would go do. I'd be hanging out in the PT area, or like, you know, speaking with doctors on what I need to do. And we had a lot of resources, but I just kept finding myself in that room. I wasn't practicing as much. I was recovering from injuries constantly. And yeah, I guess my personal experience with the traditional like health and fitness slash physical therapy field is just not great. I didn't.
Hey, Jevin, can I just interject
wanted.
real quick so people understand what you mean when you say traditional?
Yeah.
Traditional just means is a synonym for sloppy. Are we all?
Yeah. Well, they like you said earlier, like you said before, they're not accounting for a lot of things that, like, when I train with you, you're accounting for. Just in general, like they're just not accounting for a lot of variables, and that's the biggest difference I saw with FP. Like, especially the first time I trained with you, I'm like, holy shit, this guy's like accounting for a lot, and it's like almost like overload for my brain. But it's like, well, this is probably a good thing, because what I was doing before wasn't really helping me whatsoever. It was kind of just like pat me on the back and just threw me back out there. Whereas like, hey man, I'm gonna try to account for as much as I can and try to get you as healthy as possible, moving better, whatever I can do. And it's like, okay, well, it's a little bit overload, but like I just need to consistently think about it, consistently work with this guy, and maybe I'll get a step in the right direction. And that's kind of what I did, and I'm at where I'm at now. So, and I'm continually learning, still kind of confused on certain things, but I feel like I have a better grasp on the first principles approach when it comes to FP and a lot of other things.
Well, while we're on the topic, I'll quickly go through this, Rodney, because I know you got to get a bunch of topics you got to get through, and we don't have all day.
Yeah, you're good.
But I wanted to talking about athletics. When I was over at Cornell University, you know what they were using a lot of. So pretty much there was a competition. We had about half the wrestling team that decided to join Kyle Dake and myself and Pablo Martin. When it came to it was Pablo was primarily working with the half the wrestling team, and half of them opted to go to our side. The other side was still doing traditional lifts and whatnot, and quite literally you started seeing a gravitation that athletes wanted to come back to do FP. But the problem was that the politics at that time were the coaches at that time were not happy about FP. They weren't happy about these changes that were being made. So they stopped coaching the wrestlers that were on our side. They would literally stop coaching them and showing them technique, because they were joining our side. So we had that going on with us, and we still have some wrestlers that were still, I'm just going to say it. I don't fucking care. I'm just going to say it because it's what happened. And so they just stopped training our guys. Like, they would not do one-on-ones with them anymore. That's the kind of shit that we had to deal with, right? After all things went down, we started Kyle started winning world championships and then not getting injured and just started mopping people up. At that point, the guys next door were trying to find a way to kind of like bridge a gap between us when they were playing these really dirty political games. Eventually, what it turned out, this is what it wound up becoming, is they started abandoning deadlifts, back squats. They started abandoning bench presses. They started abandoning all of that shit. And I would assure you that a good chunk of that wrestling team is still employing FP principles on both sides of the aisle, right? Whether it's people doing FP directly with Kyle, which I'm assuming is happening, or whether they're doing FP on a sloppier version of FP on the other side. The funny thing is, when you bring the real world into the lives of these people that were naive enough to believe that science applies to everything, it's funny to me how quickly they make the adjustment over, but they don't acknowledge any of those changes happening. I'll tell you this much: Rob Cole, who was the head coach of Cornell, he sure as fucking acknowledged it, and he's like, "Hey man, I'm sorry you left. I'm sorry you guys aren't with us anymore, but we do have to acknowledge that you made a humongous change on our program, and that the guys next door are not doing a bunch of pointless, sloppy weight training. I mean, it's probably still sloppy, but at least they're doing less It's kind of like they just go there for the sake of doing something, but they're not really doing anything, kind of thing, right? They're going to go do some supposedly rehab exercises. But that's my practical experience with just one fragment of athletics. But I've dealt with all sorts of different shit like that. But that was just one little story that I thought I would interject that I thought was really interesting. I felt like I needed to tell you guys about it.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I still hear of other wrestlers that are not public about it that either do FP or that they're they use the principles as well. I don't know if they were related to Caldig, but yeah, there's
Let me put it this way: a lot of people on the American national team are doing FP. And let me put it this way: a lot of people are doing FP. Remember, 10 years ago, nobody was talking. If you look at the dates, right, you'll see some older dudes that do like half-assed variants of FP. These guys weren't talking about, contralateral reciprocation or anything like that, or anything that related to it. All of a sudden, these guys get old, and then boom, it just snaps. Like, I've been thinking this way, no bullshit, since I was probably about 11, 12 years old. This is how I've looked at movement and not exercise, but this is how I've looked at athletics since I was very young.
We have a guy that confirmed on the college scene too for you, Naudi, by the way.
Oh yeah, Nick Stemmet writes, can confirm on the college scene too. Yeah. Yes, there's guys everywhere doing FP all over the place. Yeah. It's like the problem is, bro, the way that things work. It's like, like you get guys like Saladino, which I love what he's pushing. I think it's great. But Ray Pete has been pushing a lot of that for a much longer period of time. But he's not as well articulated as a Paul Saladino. Like, Paul Saladino is obviously a scholar. The guy's really fucking. He's brilliant in so much of what he does. But he can also like pitch himself. He's a really good looking dude, super athletic. It's like but when you look at people who are like originators and things, if you look at somebody like Jack Cruz, everybody's talking about, how you need to get UV light and how EMF is damaging. He was really the guy that was really pushing hard to get everybody to change over, right? But he doesn't get any acknowledgement. It's just kind of that. For me, I just made sure.
Yeah.
What was that, John?
You have to give credit where it's due. And,
but they don't. The thing is, nobody does. And I sensed that the industry was going to do this to me, and that's why I started opening my mouth and I said, "Fuck you! You're not." I see what you guys have done to other people in history, but you're not going to do that to me. And that's kind of why I have such a shit reputation, or not just a shit reputation. I just kind of have the reputation of being a little bit harsh, a little bit critical of people in my field because their methods are changing. And I know the reason that they're changing, and they would never admit to why they're changing, but they are changing. And unfortunately, that's kind of how this world works, is that people, even beyond that, there's people that honestly take on FP that they don't even know they're taking it on. I heard Paul Chek talk about that one time, where people were like, oh, the shit you do, Paul Chek, is stupid. He was saying that people would tell him that. He's like, hey, you idiot. Everybody at that time was using Swiss balls for like their ab work and whatnot. It's like, next time you're doing a crunch on a Swiss ball, remember, dumb fuck, that was me that actually created that, and you don't even know that. And I think it's kind of like history's repeating itself all over again, except I think way more people are using FP protocols, for sure, way more than we can even calculate. But I mean, there's some things where you're going to have to give credit because there's technical gaps. And the reason I kept developing FP and I kept changing it was because I'm like, I'm going to get copied over and over and over and over again until you cross so many barriers that there's going to come a point where it's like that wall is too high to climb for that person to get over. They don't have the aptitude to get over that wall. And that was maybe about, I think, 2016, 2015 was when that wall started getting climbed. And then eventually we got over that wall. And like now everybody that's here and everybody that's in FP can't be touched. You can take the best of who's in this industry, the best physio, and they're not going to be able to do anything in comparison to what you guys can do at this given point, because you guys have crossed those barriers with me, obviously. So yeah, it's what prompted me to talk about that?
We're talking about evidence-based with athletes.
Oh yeah, well, I was just talking about how originators don't get credit for their work.
Right. There you go.
Like,
My fault.
People are very apt to say, you know what? I was very skeptical about that guy. Yeah, I'll let him get slaughtered by the public. Let me see what I can snag from this shit, and then just not mention where my first principles came from. Let me not even talk about where my application came from. It's just how it is, bro. That's the nature of how people work. But at the end of the day, let me put it this way: there comes a point where you don't want to be too overly self-important with this shit. It's just like, because a long time ago I saw Jacques Fresco talking about like why it's important to cite the source, and because for me for a while I was like, who gives a shit? What does it matter if you cite the source or not? Like, who gives a rat's ass? And so he's like, it's important to cite the source, because if you don't understand the thinking that brought about that kind of innovation, then you're going to get less of that kind of innovation as time moves forward. So it's important that you cite the source, so to make sure that people don't that you cite the source, so people don't lose the lesson. Because that essentially what I feel that anybody who's innovating, what you guys are doing every single day when you're training, Johnny, you're learning lessons, I'm sure, every fucking day when you're sparring, when you're doing wrestling, jiu-jitsu. Mike and Rodney, I'm sure when you're training clients, or even just experiencing what's happening in your personal life, are there not constant lessons being learned? And it's because you guys, because you guys are in the trenches, and I think it's important that we acknowledge those that are going through the trenches to figure this shit out. Sorry, guys, I keep talking too much.
No, you're good, man.
You're good. You mentioned Ray P. You mentioned Jack Cruz, and then someone said Jack Cruz craps on Pete. So I wanted to touch on. Do we?
You know what?
Because
hey, one second. I want to interject on this. Let's scrub all the bullshit away. Let's scrub all the fucking haters away and just focus on this kind of subject matter, because I think that this is relevant. Fuck everybody else, guys. Let's focus on us. Let's focus on what's relevant to us. Fuck these guys. Go ahead. That was really good. Well, I like that.
Yeah, it's important because just because you're mentioning Jack Cruz, or just because you're mentioning Ray P, or because we mention Yuval Noah Harari or Jack Fresco, does it mean that we agree 100%? Does it mean that there's no nuance, there's no context? I liked what you said about citing the source, because we want to learn more of the thinking that got them there, not necessarily take what they say as rigid and then just keep repeating it, which you said a good video yesterday talking about.
Sounds very culty, Rodney. It sounds very culty of you.
How dare you think the same thing as another
experts,
person.
And it was this video that was mentioning how experts or most experts that you see out there, they're really just memorizing stuff and repeating it. Very few are deliberately, like you mentioned, testing and going in the trenches and learning lessons every day. So if you guys have some thoughts on that, we don't shit on anyone, or we don't completely idolize anyone. We're trying to learn the thinking behind it, and that's what FP has taught me how to do, at least. So
it's helped me learn how to discern data and try to kind of pick out, okay, well, some of this stuff that this guy talks about is relevant, and some of this stuff that this guy talks about is relevant. Okay, but they don't talk to each other, and they don't, they're kind of separate. But you know what? I think I could utilize both of these things, and it's like, I mean, if you just look at FP and the results they get, that's kind of how you have to go about things to get the results that they get. So
I think that's where intelligence orients from, by extracting what is relevant.
Right. Yes. Discerning data.
Yes. That to me, what is relevant?
But people want to be spoon-fed shit and they want a pill to fix their stuff, and they don't really want to think that much, and it's really annoying. But yeah.
And they do it with a P2. They say, oh, you just want to, you're just posterior tilt or anterior tilt. Yeah. Oh, you're just neutral. Oh, you're just this. And they're not thinking.
No.
That's the problem. And again, this is one of the things where I talk to figures, because I'm starting to get more connected. More people are starting to come on board that are like, oh, look, Naudi's not taking such a harsh tone. They're probably going to watch this video and be like, let's get the fuck away from this guy. And I hope they do. Literally, I hope they do, because I don't want to deal with them. Because with every one of these influencers come all their bad habits, and I don't want to have to sit there and tell you, hey, bro, that's a bad habit, and I don't want to deal with that. I don't even want to get involved in it. What was I going to talk about? It was important. What was it?
You're talking about the FP being neutral, or people thinking that it's one thing, either an anterior
that's just
tilt
capitalism.
or neutral spine.
That's the whole idea. I was going to talk about capitalism. People don't like the fact that I shit on capitalism as a capital. I'm full on fucking capitalist. Everybody here knows what I'm working on. Don't say anything, but everybody here knows what the fuck I'm working on. I'm a capitalist to the fucking bone. I have to be. This is because I have to be adaptive in order to make an impact on the society. But I truthfully feel that capitalism is problematic. It forces you, but it's not capitalism. Let me put it this way. I feel like capitalism is an extension of people's hierarchical pursuits. I think that's really what it is. So I don't necessarily, actually, I need to retract that statement now that as I'm saying it. I think it's actually the fact that people have operated within hierarchies for such a long period of time, and we've just extended that into a money-based society. But that if we went into socialism, then you would also have character assassinations that take place then. So essentially what it comes down to is if I cue a posterior tilt, or if I tell the lumbar spine to flex or extend or rotate or laterally flex, or if I tell the T-spine to do some similar things, then people are going to automatically say, well, you know what? That's what he does. So now let's completely shit on it. Now people don't say anything. At least I don't know. From what I've seen recently, people are just like, I don't really know what FP people are doing. They're not really making a claim. The claim that we make is that if you come to us, if you have a problem with your lower back, we're going to address the entire body to fix your lower back, instead of telling you, oh, do an anterior tilt. Let me work on something local. Look, you got a hip hike on that side, or maybe the hip is dropped on that side, and we maybe need to hike it more. we don't think about things in that regard. That's a part of what we think of, but we address the entire structure as a whole. And the more variables that we can account for to distribute tension and pressure into different areas, the more likely it is that you get rid of the pain. So you can't solve a problem in isolation. I've told people this for the longest time. And so, it's one of those things where people want to pigeonhole you so that way they can shoot you down in the public space and then say, hey, look, this is what this guy has to offer. About 4 or 5 years ago, I said, you know what? I have to stop being this guy that's like a knee over toes guy or whatever, because if I go down that path, that's all I'm going to be, and that's all anybody's ever going to characterize me as. What I want to be is the results guy. I want to be the guy that always gets the most results. And I thought about that like over 10 years ago. I was like, okay, I want to make sure that we're the results people. That when you talk about FP, these are the guys that, you make fun of because they get results. That's you know what? If anybody's going to clown on me for anything, it's for people saying, oh, that person's too rigid. That spine has too much structural integrity in it. It needs to be flaccid and loose. You need to run and just relax. When you run, just relax. In fact, let all your muscles relax and then just fall on the ground and just fucking just relax. If you just relax while you run,
man. That's
all you got to do. Just run and relax. And then if you run,
flick your heel out, bro.
Will do what they're supposed to do, right?
Oh,
flick your heel out. That's all you got to do.
Know
your knee, flick your heel. And get your head over your knee.
Funny. What's funny is I already know there's going to be a topic that's going to get you guys going.
Oh, no.
It's like there's always these topics that I know are going to get you guys going, and you guys are like, Jesus, like really using to tell people to relax when they run. And I don't want to shit on everybody, man, because at the end of the day, they got to test things for themselves.
Sure.
But when you understand the nuance of life and you understand the complication that's associated with trying to solve problems, God damn, bro. Like people are like, it's like we're living in another dimension, and it's impossible to try and explain this to people. Yeah. It's like unless you take a full deep dive and you ask yourself the question, because this is what I thought was interesting with Rodney, what he said is like, when you prompted is, extracting what is relevant.
Right.
Is that not what life is all about? How do I extract what is fucking relevant? So when we look at like Saladino, or we look at somebody like Jack Cruz, even though he shits on Ray Pete, it's kind of, I like how he shits on Ray Pete, and he says that there's half truths in what he's saying, because it's like he still looks at things from too much of a biochemical lens instead of looking at it from a bioenergetic lens, right? Biophysical. So to me, I'm like, okay, that's awesome. I like the way that he goes about it. Do I agree with everything that he's saying? I agree with a lot of the things that Jack Cruz talks about, right? Yeah. I think that there's a lot of great things, but never mind that. It's like I had Carrie B on my live feed like a month and a half back. You have people that are like evolving it even further that I think in a great way, and I think she's doing a great job with it. I think that the way that we're doing it in FP is, I think we do it better than anybody. I think really, because that's the first principle: extracting what is relevant, what relates to this specific person, relative to their specific dysfunctions, relative to their given environment, relative to their genetic traumas that have been instilled upon them. We treat people as individuals, and then we take in the individual nature of their circumstance, and then we try fixing them or whatever. But
and we're also not just movement people. We're not just
no.
You know what I thought was crazy, bro? You know what I thought was fantastic? And you guys tell me. Did you guys all watch I know, Rodney, you had to. You were in the fucking podcast. But when you guys were talking about the biopsychosocial model, it was light bulb moment. I'm like, oh my God. When you guys start talking about the biopsychosocial, I'm like, isn't this what we've pretty much been doing the entire time?
The whole time.
The whole time.
Yeah.
Because I saw it a long time ago. I'm like, oh, this person had a really rough day at work. Good luck trying to get that person to do a pendulum squat. Good luck. Have fun with that one, Naudi. While that guy's scalenes are like this, and they're not going to let go. Try getting that person to swing their shoulder while their scalenes are saying, dude, we're not going to move our shoulders tonight. This is just not what's going to happen.
Yeah.
That's like, that right there is like, to me, telling me that I'm like, okay, I need to try and figure out what's up with this person's psychology. Sometimes these people are not receptive to you incorporating some kind of psychological intervention. So you have to find other means to trick their body to down-regulate its stress response so they can be accepting to the feedback. Like, were you guys at that point? I'm sure that came in with the research team. Who the hell? I guess did you guys all conclude that at the same time or something, that we were kind of already doing this biopsychosocial model? Did you guys already know this? Because I wasn't even seeing it.
I knew it whenever I was like implementing all the changes I needed to do in my life. Like it just
like,
made
did
sense.
You know what the biopsychosocial model was? Like, did you actually study it?
No, I don't think so. I was like, I'm noticing I'm changing like things in my psychology. I'm changing my biology in a sense. Like I'm changing like my biomechanics, and I'm also
And
changing
your environment.
like, in the environment I'm putting myself in. So I'm like, okay, well, so that's why when you did the biopsychosocial model, I'm like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Like, no, duh. But
Yeah,
like,
so
I guess I didn't come to that conclusion.
because I asked. Yeah, because I asked people and I was like, hey, dude, what exactly do you cover with your protocols? And then they would be like, okay, you know, what was it? Be like, I take somebody in, and if they're really, really stressed out, I try and get them to not be afraid of doing certain ranges of motion. I try and get them to relax. After I get them to relax, I put them through these ranges of motion. While they're relaxed, I put them through these ranges of motion, and then I do strength training exercise, and I slowly, you know, periodize training for them. And I do different lists, but the most important thing that I try and do is not demonize any kind of an exercise or whatever it may be. And I'm kind of like, you know, I guess that's true. And you know, that's another thing that we got to get a lot of flack for, is that people are like, you know, you guys always, you know, take a dump on other methods or whatever it may be. Well, yes, we do, because they're short-sighted. But there's times where we say there are some exercises you should be, I guess I wouldn't say afraid of. I don't want to say afraid. It's just kind of like, I'm not afraid of a deadlift. Like, I don't like wake up in the morning going like, oh God, is there a deadlift around the corner that I need to worry about? Oh shit, oh God, I hope there's not a squat rack around there and I don't fall under a bar and have it land on my traps and then I do back squats. Like, I'm not afraid of the Like,
I hope someone doesn't ask me. I have to help them lift their couch today because.
Oh, dude.
Yeah, exactly. You won't be able to do it without deadlift experience. Yep.
Can't do it.
Can't do it.
Yeah,
deadlifted in years.
My brother, I remember he talked to, because my brother's a beast. Like, my brother's like a friggin' straight gorilla. And I remember he used to do massive amounts of deadlift. He used to do like bodybuilding competitions and whatnot. This dude could deadlift a house. And he was talking about that while he was deadlifting, his sciatica would get so bad that he would try lifting up his girlfriend at the time and he couldn't lift her. And she only weighed maybe like $115 or something like that. And he couldn't lift her without screwing up his back.
That's right.
It's like, and he does, you know how much he deals with that now? Now he's like 42. This was back when he was like 27, 28.
Right.
Now he's 42 and he never has to deal with anything like that. He's doing the most physical labor he's probably ever done, and he's not feeling any kinds of pain in any way, shape, or in any capacity. So I just think it's like it's one of those things, man, where what the hell were we talking about this time? Sorry, I'm like all over the place, guys.
The exercises that are quote unquote bad.
Yeah, that was scared of any exercise.
Right.
Yeah.
Let me put it this way.
Biopsychosocial model.
Yeah.
The movement library, I used to even tell people, like, you know, don't do handstands. Get away from handstands. Like, how many? I'm going to ask you guys a question right now. How many people in modern times have the cranial development, the shoulder development? How many people can take that kind of pressure on their shoulder girdle without like exacerbating more dysfunctions?
They can't.
Right?
They'll fuck themselves up.
So what I would tell people is, I'm like,
there's things more fundamental you have to address before we're doing handstands. Like,
exactly. And Jeb, when we were kind of playing around with some handstand maneuvers or whatever, you're not fully ready for it yet.
No.
Either. But ultimately, what I tell people is, I'm like, hey, look, like,
Sorry, I was like, even Jeblin, because I see him and it's like,
well, we have to
he's
do
him.
sometimes for wrestling
like,
warm-ups,
you know,
we have to do handstands. I only do like two steps and I roll out. So I'm like, I can't do that for those.
So the idea is that we're like, when you do, people at that time were like focusing on doing handstands, and I'm like, you know, there's these two things that you stand on top of all day long, and you still haven't figured out how to do that.
Yeah, right. That's so true.
What might make more sense if you learn how to stand correctly? Be like, well, I know how to stand correctly. I just pin my shoulders back like this, and I'm standing straight. And I'm like,
just a heads up, guys. We're at about an hour. Hopefully, it doesn't kick us out. It should let us go longer, but if
we could do a part two. If you guys want to do a part two.
Yeah, we'll start again, but we'll see. It should be fine, but I think just a
heads
heads
up. If it cuts off, we'll do a part two.
We'll start again. Yeah, we'll keep going. Cool.
Sorry, but yeah, it's like people just get so fucking far ahead of themselves with what they're doing. They don't even think about the long-term implications of what's happening. So I guess it's to try and explain. I remember back in the day when I used to run like human foundations courses. This was back like I think in 2015, I think it was. Guys, by Friday, I would do 6-day courses at that time, right? I would do 6 days. By the 6th day, people would still be struggling to just do a standing neutral position fairly decently.
Totally.
They still to get them to shift their pelvis back slightly and do a little posterior tilt.
It's crazy.
Without having their spine going to a hard lumbar flexion or whatever, or without having them default back to going into an anterior pelvic shift, was so fucking difficult. It was so hard to do that. And in that sense, I can say, you know what, the industry has gotten a lot farther than where it's at, because we don't have those same types of problems with horses. Back in the day, it was a freaking nightmare because, again, people didn't know how to extract anything that was relevant. There were no big four at that time to really like push hard on people, like, and there wasn't like a movement to do that kind of shit. But then I guess this kind of brings it full circle as it relates to talking about science. It's like, Rodney, you were saying earlier, it's slow. It's a very slow process, and that's, you know what, Johnny, what was it that I was going to have you talk about? I said that I wanted you to talk about this before when we were talking. When you were back. What was it?
Had to do with trainers, like the trainers I've encountered before I started doing FP.
There's one thing that I want to, because I think martial arts is really a science. Like, I think if people call it a sport, I'm like, basketball is a sport. I think that martial arts is more of a science. I guess basketball is a science too. I think sports themselves are sciences. We think of the competition aspect of it, and we don't assume that, because we assume that science is not competitive when it is competitive. But that's a whole other side discussion. But I guess what I wanted you to get into is, like, as you're technically figuring things out, how FP has helped you. Like, have you found that FP has helped you with your striking? Have you found that FP has helped you with your wrestling? Have you actually found that, because a long time ago I saw that mechanics in general, like biomechanics in martial arts, were universal, and that essentially a roundhouse kick has elements of it that you would find on a double leg or a hip toss or even a right cross, that there's components to every one of these motions, and that they're all generally similar. Have you been noticing this popping up more and more as you're actually working, obviously, with sparring and whatnot, but also with your coaches?
Yeah, with my coaches, when they want me to do things, I have a better capacity to get there because of the way I'm thinking and the way I understand how to utilize my body now. Like, this goes back with training with Derek Diesel and when we're doing chambers and stuff. And we're referring back to like what I'm seeing in my sparring, what we're seeing with like Floyd Mayweather, what we're seeing with, I'll watch Cael Sanderson wrestle. I'll watch high-level kickboxers, you name it. We're referring back to like what I do and what these guys do. And like, obviously we'll watch Usain Bolt run and stuff too, but like, we'll get in there. We'll get to chambering, and then whenever I want to go train and like throw high kicks and stuff, I'm literally like setting myself up to do a high kick better every time. And the way I'm looking at my training now, I'm way more apt to do something properly as opposed to like doing something improperly and hurting myself. So
how have your tactics changed since you started getting more of these essentially movement upgrades?
I have a lot more tools, man. Like, it's crazy. I'm switching stances now. And the biggest thing is, I remember you telling me I should switch stances because it's like, hey, bro, it's going to help you stay out of your asymmetries. I'm like, huh, that's interesting. So I started like boxing southpaw, started like doing technique southpaw. And I want to say it helped me win my last fight because I utilized the southpaw stance because I knew it gave Mucciolo. I know, I came out
fucking disrespectful. Like, what the fuck? Yeah, bro, that's what I was telling Johnny when he came out. I was like, bro, that was like the most disrespectful shit that you could do. Because, like, guys will come in, like, usually when especially at 85, it's so unusual to see people like switch stances.
Switch stances and shit like that, yeah.
So what I thought was funny is that, Johnny comes in and he's like southpaw, and I'm like, all right, he's in southpaw, he's going to switch back up to orthodox, because that's what everybody does. But no, this motherfucker just stays in southpaw until he just makes a few switches or whatever. I thought that was like, that right there, I believe, is what I try and focus on the most, is trying to make what would typically be uncomfortable become comfortable, right?
Yes.
Like to get like Kyle Dake to move on his feet was really, really hard, but that's when you know that the person is understanding it. And so ultimately, like, what do you has it ultimately made you into like a more well-rounded martial artist? What's your like?
So, like, being able to coach me is a lot easier now because they can like, hey, I want you to do this, and I can fucking do it. And they're like, okay, well, that makes my job a lot easier. It's like literally like today I was working with Dia Davis, and he was having me switch stances within my boxing. So I'd start off southpaw. We would do a combo where I would switch my stance. DP does this, but DP doesn't like to stay in orthodox. But I'll stay in orthodox or I'll stay in southpaw. So like we'll do the remaining pad session in orthodox until he makes me do a combo that switches my stance again. And same thing with Thiago Alves. He's getting me to do that. And like I'll work certain techniques with Mike like on entering, like I don't want to really talk about it right now because it's kind of like it's top secret. I'll tell you
Yeah,
after.
that's
But
cool.
working on like certain entries, like to takedowns and stuff from Southpaw, from Orthodox, and it's like it's just I'm a much more I'm a much better athlete now, and I have a lot more tools. So when the coaches go in to give me advice, they have a lot more things they can tell me to do to solve.
Was
the
it not
problem in
like
front of
that
me.
before?
Dude?
Like, what,
It was nothing like this before. Like
because
I was
they
very
could,
confined. I was very confined in what I could do.
so they had to become rigid with the way that they covered your style because your body was not wanting to do the movements that it could.
I couldn't do the move. Like I would fucking like I didn't have the capacity to even do it. And it's like, and there's some guys that they do pretty well and they stay within their realm of possibilities and they do well and they excel for a certain amount of time, but they're in this box. I can tell there's some guys that are just in this box. They can't get outside the box. And it's like, well, I fucking figured out how to get outside the box. Now I have all these possibilities, all these tools I can use, regardless of the situation of what happens in a fight or just in general when it comes to biomechanics.
Crazy, man. That's awesome to hear.
Yeah.
Naudi, when you say making the uncomfortable comfortable, there was a cool example that someone mentioned. There was this guy that was doing FP. He's a skateboarder. And the thing about skateboarders is they're always basically riding the skateboard on the same side, which they call, I guess, whatever side it is. And then when they do the opposite side, they call it something else, like they're
goofy.
They're
Goofy
goofy.
foot.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So what this guy was saying was, my goofy side is not goofy anymore after doing FP because it's becoming more comfortable, and people can tell. So when they like, okay, he's doing his strong side. Oh, now he's doing his goofy side, and they want the goofy side to look basically worse, and they expect it, and it's like an art thing. It's like a flashy thing. And when the goofy side starts becoming like the strong side, then people don't care about it anymore. But it's making that uncomfortable and that weird way of doing it because they don't have access. It makes it more similar, and it sounds like that's what you're talking about, right? Eblen, like maybe when you went Orthodox or
when you
Southpaw,
work on your asymmetries and you become more symmetrical, you're gonna feel less awkward, just in general.
So it's like both sides are your strong side.
It's starting to become like that. I'm starting to like get in this like let's say someone
like boxing is your
walking,
strong
I'm
suit.
walking, right? Like, and some guy just comes out of nowhere and like is trying to square up with me. I'll square up in Southpaw or Orthodox. Like that's how comfortable I'm getting. So that's just like off an innate response.
And even like wrestling, right? Oh, you like wrestling is your strong suit, or boxing now is your strong suit, or kicking is your strong suit.
Fighting's
or,
my strong
Right.
suit.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So now fighting becomes moving becomes your strong suit.
Yeah.
Well, for me, what I think is awesome is that when you start enhancing your wrestling correctly and you start adjusting your wrestling technique, then you should throw better kicks. You should throw better punches. You should have better head movement. The thing is that they're all the same fucking thing. It's all the same thing, just in slight different variation. That's all it is. And that's what I've been looking at for a long time. Is like, how the hell do you account for that variation? Like, what is actually different about every single position, but what's the same about it? And that's what I'm still struggling to figure out at this given point. But yeah,
and
man,
that's the foundation, right?
Yes. Well, I think that's interesting when you said goofy foot. I always wondered why they called it goofy foot. And it's because that is an interesting thing. Like when you look at Southpaw, they kind of do look a little bit awkward whenever I wonder if that does have to do with the fact that we are somewhat maybe naturally asymmetrical and that it ends up looking a little bit goofy. But who knows? I guess that's something that needs to be tested a lot more.
Interesting.
Oh, damn. I think we're having to keep it together for Rodney right now.
Oh, no.
Mike, you haven't been talking very much. What the hell, man? What are you thinking about this conversation right now, bro?
Well,
It's over there all quiet.
No, I mean, I just think I think it's interesting because what you guys are talking about, it's like, think about how hard it would be to come up with a scientific study that would encapsulate Johnny's experience. You know what I mean? In terms of like what you're talking about and the asymmetries, it's like, okay. And here's the funny thing too. So I may as well just talk about how keeping it like in the scientific study realm. It kind of it intersects with a lot of topics, but like one thing people talk about, since you're already talking about Johnny's movement patterns, it's like, Naudi, do you use some sort of like tool? Do you use some sort of technology in order to analyze Johnny's movement? Like, are there mathematical equations?
Or give me some are you just fucking underhanding me? Here's an underhand fucking softball.
You know me.
I feel like the ball's about that big. I'll
yeah,
take it
exactly. You know me. So
I use. What's my last name, Mike?
Aguilar.
Okay, in Spanish, what does águila mean?
Oh,
Eagle.
fuck! I'm so
Someone
ignorant. I'm
Google
so
this?
ignorant.
Eagle.
Eagle.
Is
I
it?
use
Oh
my
yeah,
fucking eyes.
I did know
Our,
that.
our
actually.
family, yes. So Aguilar, it's like, yeah, we're known for probably having good vision, I would have to imagine. So quite literally, you know what the funny thing is, bro? I was watching my mom. She had sent me a video of my dad doing some fucking like manual labor. He's like almost 80. And it was fucking wild watching this guy like push this ginormous fucking log. Like the leverage this guy could produce. It was fucking wild. I was like, wow. Like this is all just genes. It's all genetics. Like that's quite literally it was incredible to watch. So I think a lot of it, what I use is my programmed intuition, my sensory feedback, and I use my vision. I look at things and I'm like, ah. It's like most coaches have this idea of understanding what looks good and what looks bad. I just asked the question. I'm like, well, what's good about that and what's bad about that? Johnny, I sent you a video on Mayweather throwing that uppercut. Most people would be like, nobody's going to train it. Johnny's going to train it because we're going to cover this exact sequence. We're going to train this. Yeah. And it's going to be nasty. It's going to be brutal as fuck. Right. And so the idea is, it's like, I tried to understand why something looks wrong. Like, why did early UFC fighters look so stiff? And what is it that makes boxers not look so stiff? Like, what is it that makes boxers be so composed? And I've studied that, like, obsessively or whatever the fuck. And then because I've thought about it in such a manner, let me put it this way. There's times where you can do things on the pads, like if you're holding pads for somebody, but then it doesn't translate to the fight. I've always been like, what's the blending problem? Like when you look at people that do strength and conditioning work, they're like, you know what you do is you go to the weight room, you develop strength in the weight room, you build muscle in the weight room, and then you go into the field of training.
General strength.
That's right.
Yes, exactly. So you do general strength,
right?
And then you do the general strength, and then you hope to
People
blend it
like
into
this.
the environment.
Yeah.
What's that?
You're gonna punch like this. Fucking
bench press. Manny Pacquiao.
That's right.
Bench press.
Yeah,
Manny
there you
Pacquiao
go.
goes like that to people.
I love that Naudi actually comes up with a situation where somebody does it. It's like, someone's actually done it.
You push somebody.
Yeah,
there's a time
for
where
sure.
Like you punch somebody, you come here, and then you push them.
Sure.
I mean, there's application.
Yeah.
You can push them, step in, and throw.
Yeah.
I mean, there's shit that you. So you know, that's another funny thing. Is people are like always say, "Naudi, you're so narrow-minded." Like in my early days, when I started bringing in interns, it'd be like, "Look at this idiot doing this. Look at this idiot do this." I'm like, no, there's a context where that applies. The guy's getting ahead of himself.
Sure.
But there's a context in which that applies. I can't completely shit on that because there's a point at which that could be potentiated.
That's
so
right.
everybody that would be around me would be like, what the fuck? So this guy's not rigid at all. As much as people say that I'm rigid,
You're
I'm
not rigid at all, bro.
No.
It's a prime example right there. The one
yes, exactly.
we just went through it.
So quite literally, somebody say, hey, put your head here and then put your foot here or whatever. I'm like, I'm glad that you guys are seeing that, but it's you know how many pieces there are between your fucking head? You know how many that there's pieces in your head? Like your head is not just one solid fixed object. It's like plate tectonics, right? That's what your fucking head is.
That's
so quite literally there's pieces in your head. So I'm like thinking, how many pieces are in between your head and your fucking foot? Lots of them. How do you reconfigure all those things to make it all work is the question that I asked. But
you can put your head over your foot, but like 95% of your structure is just like all out of whack, and it's just like it's not gonna help you.
Right.
Yeah.
Well,
there's a lot of other things you got to address.
It's like you're probably going to have about 20 different joints that are going to slowly probably fuse or then get bound up or get dehydrated, and then they're just going to get more and more dehydrated until that becomes a bigger problem later on down the line. Yeah. And you deal with accelerated aging or whatever it may be. So there's always a price to pay when it comes to all these things. I forgot what I was going to talk about before. I lost my train of thought. What the hell was it? But yeah, I don't know. Mike, you were talking about how the hell do we actually encapsulate this in a scientific study? How do you encapsulate life experience in a scientific study?
Right. And you
were talking about the equipment and the technology.
Well, right, exactly.
I guess I'm going to ask this question to you, Mike. Do you think that conservatives in general tend to ditch science simply because conservatives happen to oftentimes be business people that understand the realistic aspects of life?
Sure.
Well, leftists don't understand those aspects of life, so they figure, you know what? Like Mike Tyson put it best, that everybody's got a plan until you get punched in the mouth, right?
That's right.
It's like that's how life works. You develop a plan. I feel like leftists or people who really believe in science, which seem to be like the leftists are the hardest, most hardcore science people, but they also have plans, but they've never actually, if you've never actually tested the plans themselves and gone through the rigors of testing them, then ultimately you're apt to want to believe. you're apt to want to force people to believe in the blueprint, even when the blueprint isn't actually fucking working. You get what I'm saying?
Yes, absolutely.
Like, is that making sense? Because
Yes.
do you guys, what do you guys think? Are conservatives more apt to be less scientific, mainly because they have more life experience with work? It seems like they're less lazy. It appears like to me. Right. Or am I mischaracterizing them? What do you guys think?
No, I think that'd be spot on.
I think it sounds about right.
Yeah, it's like when I think of a leftist, generally the structure that I think of is like smaller, weaker. So it makes sense that you're gonna want to like hide behind a wall that's called scientific research, right?
Right.
So it's like, okay, do I put myself out there and go through get punched in the face, or do I just use this
Stay behind this
because
wall.
it confirms? Yeah. So
there's
comfortable behind this wall.
There's weak conservative people too.
Sure,
I guess
sure.
yeah. There's weak
True.
conservative people too. And then never mind that. It's not. I feel like I'm still a leftist. I feel like I'm a part of the fucking left.
Sure.
I ascribe myself as being a part of the fucking left in the sense where I'm like, you know what? The environment can change the way that I behave, and there's still aspects of my environment that they can change. They're just thinking, unless you demolish everything and you restart everything from scratch, you can't change anything about your nature. And I'm like, no, that's something that I don't fully ascribe to. So that's
you're looking at both sides and you're taking what's relevant from each side. And you're like, well, this makes sense.
Right, there you go.
We got to care about the environment, but we also have to care about how we run shit.
Yeah.
We have to care about what we do with our money, because if we just give it to everybody, it's not going to fucking produce anything.
Yeah.
Got to give it to people that actually understand what to do with the actual capital to produce shit that's actually going to help society. You know.
So the question is, and what do you guys? I say these things, and obviously you guys are all probably going to fucking agree with me because I'm confirming all of your biases. But I'm not going to confirm again. It seems like people who wholeheartedly accept science as that science is fully reliable, or that it's that something can truly be scientific. There's some things that can be scientifically debunked. So you know what? Science is so fucking vast. I just think that there's you can't treat junk science as actual science. And I think
hard
that these
science
people,
and soft science,
yes, exactly. But it's just hard science and soft science. But it's like it's not to say that the conclusions these guys draw aren't irrelevant. Like, but fuck, you know, like we'll go back to the biomechanics in pain one, right? They do that sloppy ass exercise, and then they say,
That's right.
Look, like it had no effect on their pain. Like changing their mechanics had no effect on their pain. To what degree are they even measuring it? Are they measuring it down to a microscopic level? Because even that sloppy ass exercise is going to change your mechanics.
Sure.
It's going to change your mechanics, but it's can your eyes actually see it, right? Do you have the fucking eagle eyes to fucking see it? That's the question. For me, I did a long time ago when I was looking at yoga, and I was like, this is a thing. I was open-minded to yoga. Back in about 2014, 2015, I was like, this is like fairly recent. This is like 6-7 years ago that I was like, I think yoga is good. I'm not going to really do it myself because I don't feel great with it, and I feel like I'm doing things wrong, and I don't think I want to go do yoga. I feel like I still need to map out many other things, but I had a few people that were around me at that time that started doing yoga, and then little by little, I'm like, oh, damn, their SI joints are becoming more and more excessively loose. When they hit the ground, that asymmetrical dysfunctional compression that's happening on each SI joint is getting fucking worse. I was like, whoa, I'd start seeing them go back to like the movements that we were doing before. And I'm like, there appears to be a change in this individual's viscoelasticity and these people's viscoelasticity. And this is not a fucking good thing. This is becoming a freaking problem. And it wasn't until I saw that I was like, okay, this is a fucking problem. Who knows? Maybe my biases were being conflicted or whatever, but I mean, business was good at the time. And it's not like I was trying to take down yoga at that time. I was, if anything, just talking smack more on people doing back squats and deadlifts because that was all the craze. But I could see yoga slowly starting to develop. And then it took me a little bit of time before I started getting more people who came in from yoga who said, you know what, I can't do yoga anymore because it's screwing me up. And then I'm like, wait a minute, this stretching thing is a fucking problem. I never felt great for a long period of time stretching, and it just didn't. I knew way back in the day that stretching itself was going to come with negative externalities that weren't going to necessarily be beneficial.
Sure.
I knew that there was limitations to stretching, and that's why I was trying to find active mechanical drivers to get me to a place where I could where I wouldn't need to stretch anymore. But for the time being, sometimes I would if I couldn't find a technique to fix somebody's pain, and I knew a stretch was going to help them, then guess what I would do? I would incorporate a stretch until I could find a better intervention to replace the need to actually do stretching.
Right.
So with that being said, yoga, I've had the same experience with clients like 8 years down the line now. I'm having the same experience with someone doing yoga and getting hurt. So maybe it was a bias then, but it seems to be confirmed by many people. Um, the other example is the saturated fats and PUFAs. There's
Ooh.
research on saturated fats. I mean, we'll start with
Hold
that
up,
one.
hold up. I
We'll start with
gotta
that one.
interject. I gotta interject.
Yeah, go
So
ahead.
hold on, because I talked to you, Mike, or we were talking to the research group, and
Yeah.
these guys were literally saying that eating dude, like, you know how many people have you? And I'm gonna ask you guys, how many people have you guys helped just eliminating grains and polyunsaturated fats from their fucking diets?
Huge.
Yeah, everyone that comes
Yeah.
here.
Yeah. I feel
I
bad.
never heard someone be like, "Damn, I'm fucking mad. I got off PUFAs."
That's right.
Like
You know,
their health generally gets better when they get off that shit and grains.
When did humans ever eat PUFAs? I guess through nuts. We were consuming nuts,
Yeah,
right?
but not enough to
Sure.
where what we're getting now. Like
Yeah,
the
Not as
quantity
much
we're
as
getting
now.
now is ridiculously high.
and also and
Yeah.
even in whatever's in a nut is not going to be the same as what's processed in an industrial facility. And, I mean, we don't typically eat nuts, and, but even after that, it's like, the comment was, "Oh, so go ahead and pound bacon and butter and see how you feel." And it's funny because I actually just got my blood pressure at the dentist, and it was excellent. It was literally like A+ blood pressure, and literally I pound fucking butter and all sorts of saturated and meat. I eat so much meat and butter, it's ridiculous.
Same.
It's like
Well,
it's
I
too
remember-
much. I
I
should
read-
have less, but it's like
This is right when we tell people to read why zebras don't get ulcers.
right.
Because you know what gets your blood pressure up?
Stress.
Stress.
Yeah, right.
And that's
Has nothing
like
to do
that's
with what-
sociological, psychological, and also biomechanics.
And probably
All sorts of
PUFAs.
things.
And
Biomechanics.
probably
Probably
fucking.
PUFAs.
I mean,
PUFAs
honestly,
probably playing a
PUFAs are
part,
giving
yeah.
you
I agree.
arteriosclerosis. And, there is a long-term study. So studies are, once again, here's the thing about science also, is that it's so slow going. Oh, here's a fun one, trans fats. You were talking about lead, and it took decades to cancel trans fats. I mean, you want to talk about cancel culture. I mean, can we cancel some things that, like, stop killing people? You know what I mean? We get all worked up about certain things, but then it takes you take down Kevin Hart in like 10 minutes from Twitter and knock it out, or whoever, but
Yeah.
it's going to take decades to get rid of trans fats, which we know at this point cause major health problems. So if you think about that, and then you think about something like PUFAs, and you think about the resistance to that, and the fact that there's no scientific consensus, that's the whole thing that we're talking about with the speed of scientific research. Although I'll say this because, it's being recorded, Weston Price Foundation has a lot of studies. And if you want to look at the analysis of it all, go check it out. We'll do a video on it later on. But there's plenty to read about it. But that's what we're saying. It's like, these people are calling themselves health professionals.
Hold on, Mike. Hold up. Don't fucking skip that, because I want to draw some fucking correlations here that I think are very interesting. They're very interesting. Okay. You said, isn't that graph that they show, like, caloric, like,
Right.
What's the graph show? What does the graph show?
You're talking about the study that I mentioned? The one
I'm
where
not
it's
sure.
PUFAs long term?
Like, yeah, PUFAs, and then like heart disease.
Yep.
Whatever. Like,
Yep. So there was a study. It's called the LA Veterans Hospital study. And what they did was they took vets and they put them on, it was supposed to be, it's about 8 years. And what it was there was the people who were ingesting PUFAs, they didn't start having more heart disease until later towards the end of the study. And then what happened was the correlation of all-cause mortality started to go up. So all-cause mortality started to go up, and then the study was over because they ran out of funding, and that's just how long the study was supposed to be. But the conclusion of the study is that it would have to take at least a decade to see how much polyunsaturated fatty acids affected all-cause mortality. So you want to talk about consensus in science, and then there are other studies that talk about, this is when we started ingesting PUFAs in high doses, and then now heart disease and everything.
There's
Okay.
a graph out there that's like, when were PUFAs invented? Like around the 60s or something?
I think it was 60s
no,
or 70s.
30s or 20s.
Yeah.
I know it was the
And then
20s
like
or something.
Is it Industrial Revolution?
Skyrocketing.
I think.
Yeah.
Obesity
so-
rates, heart disease, like it's like
Okay.
what?
And look, I look at that data and I'm like, what an interesting coincidence,
Right.
right? What an interesting
Right.
coincidence.
It's not causation, but it's
I was getting a call.
Yeah.
It's like both those things go up, and I'm like, oh yeah, CO2 and the temperature going up, right? So
Yeah.
you guys can look at that science and draw correlations between CO2 and which I agree with.
That's
I
right.
agree with. But
That's
then the
right.
second you throw the correlation between polyunsaturated fats and all these other health ailments that
That's
are
right.
inflammatory.
Yes.
Nah, we can't look. We gotta just ignore
that's
that
right.
shit, right?
That's
that,
right.
That to me is what's mind-boggling. That's what I don't get about
Right.
leftists. I don't fucking get it, bro. I don't
That's
understand.
right.
I think
There's another
They can't
one.
discern. They can't discern.
Yeah, they
but
can't.
It's not that they can't
That's
discern. I
absolutely
think that
right.
they're on drugs. I think that they're on
Yeah.
drugs, and when you're on
Yeah.
drugs and you're relying on big pharma, you're like, that's kind of my bias now.
Mhm.
And you know what?
Mhm.
I can't. I wonder if there's like if there's data to show like that more left-leaning people are the ones that are needing more antidepressants than right-leaning people.
Sure.
I can't help but wonder. I don't know, but you were going to say another study, Mike?
No, well, it's funny because we were talking about sunlight earlier, and there's a book called The Sunlight Solution, and it has a bibliography, I mean, that's like at least 40 pages long or something like that. But so if you want to talk about scientific studies, you know, there's a lot right there. But here's the thing, too. It's like you want to talk about correlation. We're talking about PUFAs, the Industrial Revolution, everybody's being inside. And that's when kids started to develop rickets. So when kids would develop rickets, they'd be like, okay, what's wrong with these kids? Obviously, we have to figure something out. Of course, most of them were poor. Most of them, that was before policies for work for kids. There weren't any kind of policies about kids working long hours, and they would be inside for a long period of time. They would develop rickets. And then guess what the solution was over the long term? There was actually a guy that won the Nobel Prize for figuring out that sunbathing helped heal like ailments like that. And that's what they would do. They would have them get in the sun. They'd put them in a bathing suit and they'd be in the sun, and that would help them get vitamin D, hormone D. And then sure enough, they would get better. So it was just interesting how
Why they didn't make like a vaccine for that?
I know. Well, that was the thing too. I mean, I'm surprised they didn't just normalize it.
They use the sun.
Yeah,
That's insane.
yeah, exactly. Like, why not just normalize it and be like, kids are getting rickets, they're poor, who cares? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, that's what we would do
Just
nowadays.
normalize it. Yeah.
You know what's of concern to me, bro? Is even with Instagram, like apparently Instagram has recorded like a loss, or not losses, but they've seen like a substantial amount of revenue. If Instagram
That's
and
right.
Facebook have seen substantial losses,
Mhm.
and I wonder if at some point they're going to try and take the YouTube approach where they're trying to appeal to big pharma.
Right.
But I think they do. I think they would try and appeal to big pharma in the sense of like pulling ad revenue. So I guess they're still doing it. So I wonder if they're going to try and package this platform to not to get all conspiracy theory or whatever, because this is not just basic,
but it's probably right. Yeah,
it's just
that
basic
sounds about
business.
right. Yeah.
I just wonder if like if you're telling people, hey, get outside in the sun, they're like, well, how does that enable Instagram to stay afloat? This
For
goes back to
sure.
capitalism being a fucking problem, because
No,
if you tell people, hey,
yeah,
like the solution is quite literally, a lot of the solution is get outside in the sun and stop eating these industrialized foods that aren't
Get off
necessarily
the phone. Yeah, get off the phone. Get off
yeah.
Instagram.
Oh, yeah, there you
Get
go.
off
Yeah,
social
good
media.
one.
It's
Good
like,
one.
Oh, no.
Good one.
And who's
Elimination
funding the
approach.
science?
Oh shit, bro.
Who's
gotta
funding
nip
the
it in the bud.
research?
Yeah, you
Yeah.
guys were all outside when we started, and you guys all came
Well,
in.
yeah, dude. It was weird. I guess.
It's Instagram.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, they started throttling my connection, so I had to go
Same,
inside.
bro,
They
same.
made me go inside.
Like, get inside, you fucking dweeb.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, man, it's cute. I honestly think it's cute. I look at
Mad
everybody in the field playing science, like they're playing, like, you know, it's a tea set or whatever. Like everybody's
That's
playing
right.
tea. That's what
That's
I gather,
right.
bro. I
That's
don't.
right.
I hate coming at it in this way, because I know it's like. Let me put it this way. This attitude prevents us from reaching like the 2 million people, 3 million people who are kind of physically active that look at shit on social media, because it's
Right.
all the same people. How
That's
many
right.
how many followers does Liver King have? I checked it because I just downloaded the app. I'm going to delete it after this. But I looked at Liver King's follower base. It's about 1.7 million or 1.6
Oh
million
my
or something.
God.
But no, it's not. Oh my God, Mike. It's not. Oh my God. It's this. This is what it is, bro. He had about 1.6 million, then he just got 1.7 million, and now he's stuck.
Right.
He can't get more people. So quite
Right,
literally,
I
even if
see.
you look at Squat University, there comes a point where like this demographic of people that are already interested in fitness,
Sure.
they're like, there's a cap to it. There's always a cap to it because
I
only
see
so
what
many
you're
people
saying.
can survive the stupidity of it.
That's right.
But there's, I mean, like 7 billion, like 7.8 billion people that we could possibly help. Probably not 7.8 billion. I would guess it's probably close to 1 billion people that we could actually help if we actually employed better approaches. That's why I say, even when it comes to, I guess this is kind of like, this is me, I mean, just thinking out loud, even for our community, for people that are in FP, don't get so bogged down by the controversies or any of that stupid shit. These guys are all just playing for that 2 million person, 2.5 million person market share. That's it. But you got to realize America itself has 340 million people in it. If you look at Japan, it's got, 140 million people in it. If you look at the whole of Europe, it's got like 700 million people or 600 million people, something to that effect. I don't know how big it is, but I'm like, out of all those people that are there, they have no idea what's going on with any of these fucking controversies. And the truth of the matter is, none of them could give a fuck what anybody's beliefs really are. What they care about is like, hey, dude, I got to go to work, and I need to keep going to work. And if you can make me a better performer so I can make more money, and so I'm not feeling like unhappy and I can keep things going, that's all I really care about. And so I think even getting into this whole science talk, it's kind of like we got to get in and get out quick.
Sure.
Because it's just a waste of fucking time. Like, and what I mean by it just being a waste of time, it's like nothing useful comes from it. It's not to say like I don't like Andrew Huberman. I like Andrew Huberman, especially recently. His shit's been on point as fuck. The last time I saw him on Joe Rogan's podcast, he was very on point there, and I thought it was great. He's a breath of fresh air in many regards. But the truth of it, and I don't want to say this to sound arrogant or anything like that, but many of the things that he's talked about or that he's promoted or he's tried to like say, hey, you should focus on doing these things are shit that I heard about when I was in San Diego as a trainer 16, 17 years ago.
For sure.
It's not like this is anything. I don't want to shit
missing
on
a very big portion of it too. Like,
what's that?
A lot of these people that hit on like shit that it's spot on, they're missing a very big portion of it as well.
Well, it's history. Like the figures recycle the same material every day, so every few years. So essentially, you're getting the same information, but with the new messenger.
That's right.
But it's the same demographic of audience that's there. And the reason that the fitness industry is not mainstream for the most part is because like there's just not that many people that want to participate in it. And I think one thing that people really get pissed off about with me and my attitude or our supposed attitude is that, we don't really fit in with the fitness industry, right? Like we're kind of like outside the confines of it. And for me, the way that I see it, I'm like, that's a good thing because all these figures can't reach the mainstream.
That's
like
right.
Arnold Schwarzenegger reached
That's
the mainstream or whatever, but that was by doing movies and all that shit. You didn't inspire anybody to really figure their shit out.
That's
so
right.
quite literally, this intolerant attitude that we have at FP is fundamentally what's going to enable us to scale up to reach those masses of people that are so unmotivated to go to the gym because they feel like shit all the time.
That's right.
We're getting to the source of the problem. So for me, right, people are going to look at me like I'm fucking crazy right now, right? But in about 15 years, 20 years, people are going to be like, that motherfucker was the Steve Jobs of his time for this industry because he was completely intolerant with the incompetence of our field. So sometimes I get like upset at myself because I'm like, maybe I should play a little bit more middle ground. Maybe I should be lenient with like with the Tea Party, and maybe I should grab a little fake cup and be like, "Hey guys, look,
fuck them,
Johnny, I'm dead."
Sometimes I feel like I should do that, but I'm like, I can't. I just it's such a waste of time to go down that path.
Text me and I'll remind you, no, bro, don't do it.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you. I appreciate it. And so the whole idea is, bro, is I think we're good operating independently, and it's like, Mike, I think you've been doing a great job. Rodney, like you guys, everybody on this fucking call, and even the FP community, I think we're all doing fantastic. We just need to stay honed in on our message, which is quite literally just becoming more proficient with understanding how the body works. And as time passes, as time progresses, there's going to be cool things popping up. I can't say what it is. And there's people that know what it is. It's some really good shit popping up. And it's going to be very easy to scale up functional patterns as an operation. And we're going to be able to show people that, hey, look, we weren't the crazy ones, right? You guys can implement all these controversies and like just recycle the same bullshit that everybody's been talking about the last 30, 40 years. But when it's all said and done, consumers don't give a shit about that. Consumers just care about, okay, you're telling me, Mike, right, you're eating loads of saturated fats, and what was your blood pressure at?
104/60 something. It was the blood pressure everybody wants. It's like the
Okay,
one thing
so-
I can really brag about is my blood pressure was really good at the dentist.
And your beard.
I'm really
And your
holding
beard.
strong
That's a-
on it.
that's a
Yeah,
mean-ass
and people
beard.
like my beard. I don't know. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm cool with
I like
that.
it too. Keep
Yeah, I
it.
appreciate that.
Keep it, man.
Yeah, hell yeah. So anybody, yeah, going back to the thing, I'm like, that's what people care about. Hey, look, I go to the doctor, and we
Right.
get all this shit all the fucking
Yeah,
time. People
that's
go
right.
to their doctor and be like, hey, my testosterone's up.
That's
Hey,
right.
like my heart rate or my blood pressure has actually regulated. My cholesterol levels are actually more regulated now
Yep.
since I've been following your damn protocols. Since I've eliminated PUFAs, since I've eliminated grains.
That's
Since
right.
I've been focusing on implementing practices that reduce my stress, fixing my mechanics, doing the things that following the procedure. Since I've been getting sun, everything is just a lot better. And this is the most common thing that I've done, because back when you came in, Mike, I was very much talking about anxiety and dealing with anxiety. In recent times, I barely ever talk about anxiety. And one of the most common things that I hear about when people come to HBS courses, or one of the most common things that I hear about when
Right.
people have messaged me or whatever, is like,
Right.
dude, what's funny? Like, I've been doing this FP stuff or whatever, and I feel great with my body. But I don't know. I feel like I've turned a corner with my mind, with my
Sure.
psychology, and I'm just way more productive. I'm less like depressed. I'm less anxious all the time.
That's
and
right.
I'm thinking, like, I look at all the things that I used to like, and I maybe don't like them anymore. So I'm kind of dealing with the crisis now. I don't know
Yep.
how to deal with this crisis of like all the shit that I used to think was cool. It's like I had one student who said, you know what, like my father died and I didn't cry.
Right.
And everybody was kind of shaming me for it. And I'm like, dude, everybody it's you cry because your dad dies. And bro, it's like, that's fine. I'm not saying that you shouldn't cry if your parents
Right.
die, but sometimes people will begin to deal with anxieties. Like I've had people who I've known who've had family members die, and they got over it fast. And they're like, well, I need to stay productive, because I know if whoever it was that died that I cared about also cared about me.
Sure.
And more than anything, what they would care about is that I'm going to actually live a much better life.
That's right.
If I'm a parent, which I'm not, and I'm never going to have kids in this society, but if I'm a parent and I have a kid, I'm thinking I'm passing on my DNA to this said individual.
That's right.
I want that person to overperform to ensure that they pass on their DNA so that I survive. Like that's the whole point of it, right? That's the point of it all.
But
But yet
people have kids, can't live forever, so they're like, oh,
Yeah, of
pass my
course.
DNA and they'll
Yeah.
live for me.
Right.
You're passing on the baton, but it's like this race is eventually going to end. All
Yeah.
things come to an end, and we're probably pushing it closer to the end than the beginning
sure.
if
Right.
we don't get our shit together.
That's
but
right.
the key point is, it's like so many people tell me, I'm dealing with my life way differently, and I don't worry as much as what I used to before. My worrying has gone down. I get concerned, don't get me wrong, but the overreactive worrying has diminished substantially since I've been employing FP protocols. That's one thing that I think like people oftentimes fail to recognize, and that's why people end up sticking it out with FP long term, because they get the results, they get the benefits. And if there's anything that I could say to the community, because I'm not going to be back on Instagram for a while, it's like, hey guys, just stay, and even for everybody that's in this group, don't get so sucked into the bullshit. It's just bullshit. It's everybody playing at the tea party, and everybody's like, there's different tea parties or whatever, and some people are like, hey, look, that person's air tea is not as good as my air tea. And that person's air tea is, their air tea is okay, but our air tea is the best. Like we have the best, you know what I mean? That's kind of how this field works.
Well, the way we make our air tea, it's like we do this like specific thing, and it makes it taste like 10 times better.
Yeah, exactly.
That's pretty much
blow
it.
into it, we go.
That's pretty
That's how you
much
blow
it.
into the cup or something.
It's how you blow into it and stir it. It's like the way you stir it.
How you stir the air. How you stir You lift your pinky up, exactly. So for me, I'm like, I look in the mirror every day and I'm like, holy shit, I got some fucking serious work to do. I'm like, I'm so fucked up. I look at my body all the time and I'm like, oh God, Lord. Oh God. I look at my teeth. I look at everything. I look at I've told people this over and over again. I look at myself in the mirror and I'm like, yeah, I'm not what I'm supposed to be. Like somewhere along the line, some block happened and then I didn't become who I was. And science has no answer to this.
Nope.
In fact, science would tell me I'm a very healthy individual based upon what my blood markers are and all that shit. It would tell me I'm already
Change the goalposts,
right.
bro.
that I'm
Yeah,
already
move the
fine. I just
goalposts.
need to keep. Yeah, exactly. So it's like I just need to keep doing the same thing that I'm always doing, and I'm like, yeah, I don't think that's going to get me where the fuck I need to be. I'm trying to raise the bar. So quite literally, to everybody in this community, we need to keep thinking about raising the bar, because relative to the average person, you're probably already perceived as a healthy individual, but that doesn't really mean anything. It's like because
right.
we're just. Think about how, like, remember when I was talking about the whole lead poisoning in the environment? We were all dealing with lead poisoning. The whole planet was dealing with lead poisoning.
Right.
How much of the planet is dealing with glyphosate poisoning right now?
Right. For sure. Everybody.
Right?
Jesus, bro.
So it's like poisoning. We do nothing to clean up the fucking. We do some things to clean up the problem, but we don't do anything to like make up for the loss.
Right.
FP is represents a situation where we're trying to make up for what we fucked up. How do we reverse engineer the damage that we got in from all that lead poisoning, right? From all the arsenic, from all the, who knows how many fucking contaminants are out there.
How much shit.
There's so many out there. I don't even want like BPAs, everything that's out there. There's so many contaminants.
Things that are hitting us right now, EMF,
that we're not even aware of.
Yeah.
That we're not even aware of.
Yeah, shit that we don't even know about yet.
So the thing is, we in FP we have our work cut out for us, and we're not playing a tea party. We're not, and I know it sounds condescending to the rest of the industry, but I don't care. Like so many times I'm like I'm always stuck in that. I know because I talk to you guys and I'm like, do I kind of try and do the little olive branch thing, and do I try and act stupid for a while? You know, like I try and engage with these people, and it's just like all I am is a giant fucking buzzkill. That's all I ever am. I'm like, why do you value that? Why don't you value going to sleep at 7:30 or 8 o'clock at night? If you don't have to be up, why don't you just turn off the fucking phone and go to sleep? Like if you don't have to be. And I know Jevlin, you're getting close to that time. It's about 8:40 where I'm at right now, and I'm like, like if I didn't have to be here right now, because I feel like we have to do this has to happen because it's orienting our community to be much wiser in the decisions that they make. So in essence, it's like if you don't have to be up at that time, then why don't you just go to sleep at 7:30 or 8? Oh, because you're an old person. You don't want to go out to dinner with us? You don't want to go grab a beer or something? No, I don't. I don't want to do anything like that. I'm an adult. And adult humans don't do shit like that. Adult humans understand that they have a duty to fulfill in this life and that they need to tackle those duties. And that's just how it is. Life is work. Life is not pleasure. It's constant fucking work. And yeah, it's fun. Don't get me wrong. When the work is all said and done and you get that time to kind of like, okay, we get to chill a little bit. We go to the sun and fucking hang out, maybe fucking work out a little bit. That's the fun in it. But even then, that's fucking work. Life is just work. And I think I think that people psychologically understand that we've lived in very difficult circumstances in the past. I think everybody understands that, right? Everybody's like, oh yeah, we've experienced famines, huge wars, plagues, all this shit. And now it's the good times. Now we get to live it up. And I'm like, no, we don't. No, we don't. We got to get to work right now. We got the work baton passed down to us, and we got to get to work. And that's what people don't like. That's what people don't like about me fundamentally. No. That's fundamentally it. That's what people don't like about FP altogether, is that I'm going to tell you, hey, bro, you're not working. You're not working enough on the right things. And I'm not saying that you necessarily need to work more. You just need to find out how to work smarter. And in order to do that, at some point, you're going to have to at some point, you do have to work hard to find out how to work smart. And that's a pain in the fucking ass to have to deal with, bro. And so I don't think, and that's, we'll do these videos, like just so everybody understands, like Mike, the team has spoken on this, the research group has talked about this. We'll do these videos to address the fringe, which the fringe is what? The 2.5 million people in the fitness industry that are on social media.
Right, exactly.
Let's call them
the actual human population ain't shit.
Right? So that's the fringe. We can't get bogged down by fringe entities, right? And Instagram hierarchies, those are fringe entities. Yes, like, Saladino reaches hundreds of thousands of people, whatever, but in the grand scheme of things, it's not that many people. What we need to stay focused on is solving problems. We need to focus on getting better results, coding this shit much more effectively and responsibly, so that way we get to the other side and actually get mainstream adoption of relevant principles that actually end up solving problems for people. So, I guess that's kind of, for the most part. Do you guys have anything to add to that?
That was great. I think a couple things. The first one, you saying that when you look at yourself and you feel like you have a lot of work to do, I know people say, oh, Naudi's saying this and that. I see it too. So I just wanted to mention that, not just me, but other people that I talk to. And even with clients, I try to get them to like look themselves long enough in the mirror. Right. Because you start to see all the distortions, and you start to see
my dysfunctions too, right?
Yeah,
that's what you're getting at. You guys look at you guys see my problems, right?
Yeah. Yep.
So I'm not like some god or some shit. Yeah, because that's another problem. Sorry to cut you off, Rodney, because this is
I'll keep going.
Because people will take, oh, look, let me do a video analysis of Naudi's movement. Oh my God, your fucking God is fucking flawed. And I'm like, oh, you morons. You know what I spend my time telling the class in every HBS course? That I'm a degenerate turd. I do this all the time. I'm a degenerate turd. I just have to be very real about it. I look at this thing and I'm like, oh God, Oh my God. I mean, freaking, there's some
And
aspects of me. I have some redeeming characteristics about me, but my physicality's fucked. It's full on. But yeah, keep
they
going,
failed to
Rodney.
they failed to mention the progress too. I was looking at you posted your picture of your ID, but I was actually looking at a way back when you were doing a live feed, and the progress, like they never mentioned that, like your
That's
progress on your
right.
cranium.
Yeah.
My
It's
face
really
looks different, right? Not just age.
weight.
It just looks
Yeah,
different, right?
your cranium looks. You
Yes.
actually look younger. You actually look younger now than before.
Yes.
I'll
Yes.
send
But
you
that's
that. I'll send you that,
so
that
that's what
comparison.
people in our community pay attention to. We don't look at a person for where they're at. We look at where they came from, and we're very apt to take people who are trust funds in the biomechanical lottery in the biomechanical race. It's like trust fund babies, right? It's like, hey, look,
Yep.
here's a trust fund baby. Somebody was given all these things. Like, I can't believe how many people will shoot me down because of how I look, and I'm like, this is where you guys. So if I was just raised, if I was just born and I was a genetic specimen, you would listen to everything that I have to fucking say. Shouldn't you listen to people who have life on hard mode and manage to navigate it? That's what I wanted to talk about, Jevlin, because there was a point that I saw you were showing me that you were kind of getting into it. Don't mention the names, but you were getting into it. And then these people wanted to name drop. They wanted to name drop. What's your perspective on that, Jevlin? Because you're a world champion. But
Yeah.
by the way, in case anybody is wondering right here, the guy on the bottom right of the screen here, at least maybe he's on the bottom right of mine. I don't know how it works for you guys.
Same.
But the guy, Johnny Eblen, he's a world champion. I want to know what you think and what other athletes think about when people name drop athletes. Because I know this can't just be you. In general, people don't like when you name drop, right?
No, we hate that. It's like, okay, your work, because we generally know when we work with like strength conditioning coaches. I mean, some probably get lost in the sauce and they're like, yeah, they really helped me, blah blah blah. But it's like, yeah, they're just like making me do work. It's like another thing to do, you know.
Yes.
Like, oh, okay, I'm not doing my skills training, so I might, I'm going to condition my body in another way. And okay, maybe it helps, maybe it doesn't. But it's like, okay, the fact that you're attaching yourself to athletes to prove that you're good is ridiculous in my opinion, because it's like, that's not that hard to do. Like, they move well already. Like, they're a great athlete already. Like, you're literally not implementing anything on them to like make their movement better. So it's like, that was the big thing that I saw with FP was like, okay, they were like more attaching themselves to people that, had degenerative disease. I'm like, wow. Well, if they can get results with somebody that has scoliosis and that, can't walk very well because they have cerebral palsy, I mean, fuck, working with me is going to be a breeze. So it's like, the fact that this guy was like, look at all these athletes that I work with, blah, 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 I'm like, wow, you're really you're missing the point here. Like, you're missing the point I'm trying to make is like, it doesn't take that much skill to fix somebody that already moves well. It takes a lot of skill to fix somebody that has a degenerative disease. So I'm like, yeah, it was just really cringe, bro, to be honest.
Yeah, well, why do you guys, I'm going to ask you guys this question. Why do you guys think it's so hard for people to see the same implications that Johnny Eblen's putting forth? Because many times, like, if we help somebody with a neurodegenerative disorder, they're apt to just think, hey, like, whatever, I guess it's just who they help. And they don't think, well, if that person's that limited by what they're doing and they're making gains by just freaking putting the work in, utilizing this method, how do I know that's not going to work for me? Like, why the fuck is it that people don't, like, put two and two together that way?
That's tough. I mean, I think part of it has to do with the.
That's an impossible question.
It really
I don't
is.
even know. I don't know the answer to it.
Well, I think it's just overall, it's just what you were saying about discerning what's relevant. It's like, why can't people, read, hear that I mentioned Sapiens and not like freak out about it and say something completely irrelevant and address no points in the video, and then they make a big deal. But it's just like they just take like one aspect of it and they're like, this guy works with athletes, so there's this kind of social proof that's happening there, and that's the way that people operate outside of any actually real critical thinking, and they just can't do it.
The funny thing is, especially in the fitness industry, a lot of coaches, that's how they like solidify their name. Like, oh, I worked with so-and-so.
Right, exactly.
Like, oh, look how many high-level MMA guys I've worked with. And it's like, okay, well, now you worked with a lot of like, high-level MMA guys, that you must be good. Like, they must trust you. It's like, okay, but like, what the fuck did you even do? Like, what'd you do?
Did you alter their style in any way?
They don't.
Right.
The thing is, they don't alter anything within the realm of MMA. They just get them to do like these abstract fucking lifts that don't even apply to fucking fighting, really.
Sure.
Like maybe like 5% of it does. Let's just say 5%. I don't know.
That's one thing I want to talk about regarding dysfunction. you know, like when people, you could do something functional, but if your body is inherently dysfunctional, then anything you do is going to be dysfunctional, right? So quite literally, if you're a coach and you're working with an athlete and you're just overloading the patterns that they already use when they move,
Yeah,
you're just exacerbating more of their
Yeah,
dysfunction.
true.
So even that 5%, Johnny, doesn't even work. And you look
Yeah,
right now,
yeah,
we have a guy
yeah.
named Coach. I don't want to say his name because I don't want to
Yeah.
belittle him publicly.
Doesn't apply to
all
all
coaches.
Applies.
As it relates to
Okay.
strength training,
Strength
it applies to all
conditioning, it
coaches.
does. Because
Yes.
I've been in that realm, and they literally attach themselves to
All
athletes,
the same
and
shit.
that's how they get their notoriety, and that's how they get clients. It's because it's like, okay, look at who I fucking trained with. You're gonna trust in me because this guy trusted me and he's really good. It's like, no, that shouldn't be how it goes. It should go like, okay, look at the results I got with this person. And like, okay, look how many undeniable, like observable results I've gotten with multiple people. This is why you should trust me.
See, this is the thing. This is the thing where it's like, I'm not bashing on all coaches. Let's say when you look at like wide receivers when they run routes, the coaches that they have are fucking really good. Those guys, the way they get them to do those routes is like, whoa, holy shit.
Yes.
Phenomenal. Like ridiculous the way that they help these guys run routes. Would they be able to get like a 40-year-old computer software engineer to do it? No way, no how. But at least in relation to what they do for these athletes, these wide receiver coaches, these defensive lineman coaches, offensive lineman coaches, quarterback coaches, all these people, these shooting coaches in NBA, dude, these guys they all are doing the right work. These cats are doing the right work. What I'm talking about are the strength and rehabilitation guys doing anything.
That's right.
That's what we need to specify.
Yeah.
Yeah. So quite literally, if it's skill coaches are fucking phenomenal. Tennis coaches, I can't athletes don't become what they are without some kind of a coach. Otherwise, they're just a wild animal that moves pretty well. That's the truth of it. So it's like you need somebody there to coach you to help you get better from where you're at. They need to be there. You need external eyes to tell you. You need some coaches to get you to that place. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about are strength coaches, and I'm talking about people that do rehab. Those are the main two test subjects. But even with that in mind, even if you look at coaches,
that's who I was referring to as well, just in case that guy.
Yes, exactly. So with that in mind, it's not that I want to bash on all coaches. I don't care. I don't mind when somebody's teaching specific context in movement or whatever. But with that in mind, even the coaches that are out there, they could improve. They could be improved if they understand the fundamentals behind the fundamentals. So if you take a track coach and you take one of their sprinting athletes, I think at some point in the next 5-10 years, I'll take on a sprinting athlete who's already maybe like in the top 20, and I'll get him to smash Usain Bolt's fucking records. I'll probably do that in the next 5 to 10 years. Then at that point, everybody's going to fucking know and be like, okay, we're all about this shit. But quite literally, all I'm going to do is just cover the basics behind the basics as it relates to mechanical propulsion, and then just apply it to somebody who's already a fucking genetic freak, and that will be super, super easy. But going back to that whole point, I mean, Rodney, do you have an answer to that? Why is it that people can't put two and two together? That if we can work with somebody who's so regressed and get them to progress, that they can't see that could happen with them with their own? Like, what's your supposition on it? Like, don't deviate from the fucking topic. Do you not know? I want to ask the question because I want to push other people's brains on why people can't put those two things together.
Yeah, I would say I don't know. I can speculate on a few things. It could be like salary. It could be that people relate more to those that are closer to them because we get a lot of referrals, but we don't get people making those correlations with someone maybe that they don't know. There's maybe speculations, but I really don't know either. Not sure.
Skepticism, I guess. Maybe they just think it's going to be the same. I think, it goes back to that Jacques Fresco thing where he talks about
they're burned.
When he draws parts of the picture or whatever, but then you literally immediately understand like it's Abraham Lincoln or it's a boat or it's a clock. I guess it really just comes down to that it's probably associative memory where people are like, you know what? That's a before and after. So it must be one of those stupid 6-pack ab
or
whatever, where somebody's flexing and then not flexing and then they start flexing or whatever. They dehydrated. They're probably just assuming that it's somebody that somebody's doing the same kind of scamming. I guess we just have to break those barriers. But
yeah,
we will.
People think.
I mean,
that's the whole goal. The Dunner-Kruger effect
and shit
in the fitness industry is high. People think they know more than what they do, even as a consumer. But what I was going to say, Naudi, with what you were mentioning earlier, that the market cap is at around 2 million. So we are trying. It almost seems like the fitness industry is in a rut and it's kind of going over the same cycle, like topping at those 2 million. And the people that can't get those that are not genetically gifted within their movement, you're always going to hit that top. So what we're trying to do with the whole intolerance and making sure that we're really honing in into what we're doing instead of getting caught up in what everyone else is doing, because that's just going to keep us in the same cycle. So with staying focused on getting the results, it's going to get those people that will generally, maybe even the people that generally wouldn't see that correlation that Johnny saw.
How many people are dropping body fat with FP these days?
A lot. If they're doing the work, yeah.
So somebody screen record this, right? When's the last time you've ever heard me fat shame anybody? I don't do it. I don't do it. How much does the fitness industry fat shame?
A lot.
And they've been doing it for a very long time. Yeah. Has it been working? No. There's a reason for that. Yeah. And it's because you're not getting deep enough at the problem to get people who become overweight to not become overweight anymore. You need to actually understand the biopsychosocial aspects of what are impacting people to actually also be overweight. To have in general just illness overall. That's what none of these people are thinking about. And that's why what you're talking about, Rodney, is exactly it. They're stuck. The fitness industry is stuck and they can't scale up their operation. And the reason they can't scale up their operation is because not everybody has the physical capacity to do it. You have people jumping ropes and doing all this crazy shit, and it's like you can't make that work. So on my end, that's what I'm focusing on, is making tools and making technologies that make this an easier endeavor, that make dropping body fat an automatic. That's the whole idea. It's like shaming people is not really gonna. It's part of it. Don't get me wrong. Sometimes you need to dig into people. It's part of, but it's not shaming. It's just making them aware of what's wrong, and there's a way of going about that, right? Yeah. So on my end, what I tell people is, I'm like, why are you drinking that alcohol, right? I'm shaming that behavior, but I'm like, dude, you don't have to do that. Like, you don't have to smoke weed. You don't have to smoke cigarettes. You don't have to do these dysfunctional behaviors. You don't have to like be on the phone all the fucking time. There's another thing that I've always noticed. We don't have to have conversations all day long. Sometimes we can just sit and be fucking quiet for 2 to 3 hours a day and not do anything and not talk to anybody and just be by ourselves, and it's okay. It seems like people have a huge problem with that these fucking days. Yeah. They just can't sit and be fucking quiet. It's hard for them to do that. And so you want to talk about an epidemic. That is fucking one right there, bro. Yeah. It's like people we can't just sit still and be fucking quiet for a while. There's physiological benefits. There's science to back that up. You were going to say something, Mike?
For sure. No, sorry. Actually, I'm so sorry to do this. I got to drop out. I'm going to go.
Let's close it up.
I got to get out. Me too. I got to get going.
Do that. I know. I'm so sorry about that. It's so epic.
Yeah, we should close it up. So based on that, and then you can also see that the fitness industry.
Mike, if you got to drop out, bro.
Okay.
If you give me 2 minutes, go ahead.
Okay.
The fitness industry they don't even account for they still have to cope with their anxiety. They're still drinking alcohol. They're still doing all these things. So, and then the other thing is that they're still staying honed in on the controversy, on the politics, and the popularity contest. So it doesn't seem like they're going to get out of it. So I just wanted to use that as a closing statement for what you were saying, Naudi, to keep focusing on. Yeah, they're in it.
They're in it. They're in the fucking anxiety. They're in it. You fucking summarized it perfectly,
plugged into
Rodney.
the matrix.
They're plugged in. That's the whole idea.
That's right.
It's like they are yet to fucking unplug from it.
They're part of it, so they can help. So they can't help others do it, and I think that's what we're doing. And the whole intolerance and the whole discipline and everything that we kind of talk about with the drinking and being sober, everything, coffee, PUFAs, grains, it's to get us past that rut. So I think I think that's a good closing statement. So thanks guys for coming on. We'll close it there, and I'll see you guys next time.
For sure. Thank you
guys.
That
was awesome. I appreciate it, guys. That was great.
Stay up. Keep fucking working, guys. Keep it going.
You know it.